Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, signing black in, shining again. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Um, I said previously multiple times that the solution for us is in fact Islam, and I do mean the Sunni Islam. Some people have said, "Oh, you mean Middle Eastern Islam," and that's not really doing it credit or giving it enough credit when we limit it to a particular region. But I've gone on my channel and I've said this before. Now there aren't many. As a matter of fact, right now there isn't anybody in, so I'm going to give this some time for people to come in. But I wanted to say that I've got to back up, and I'm aware that I have to back up what it is that I say. And it appears now that we do have some listening in. So I've got to back up what I say, and that's fair. You have every right to want to know some evidence for the claims that I've made. You're not required to take my word for anything. That goes against the very literacy that I've been exhorting for Black people. And by the same token, if I say to you, you're illiterate because you just take something you got from a meme, then that means that when I say something, you can't just run with that either. You also can't assume that I'm wrong. And even if I make a mistake, you cannot assume that I lied. You have to assume that I made an honest mistake, because that's more likely if you're dealing with honest people. But you have every right to double check it. Try to find the evidence for or against what I told you. It just goes with the territory. I said that we need to be honest about why it is that many of us find this to be unpopular. I don't apologize for that. I've said that we need to be honest about that. What is the real reason that a lot of us don't want to even consider the possibility that Islam has solutions for us? I'm not saying this and opening up this live stream because I think that I can convince those of you that are not already convinced. What I really want to do is I want to remove the excuses. And I want us to be honest with ourselves and with each other about why we won't take this and why most of us won't even consider it as a solution. Won't even ponder the possibility that it is a solution, that it is medicinal, that it has what we need as much as it has what any other oppressed people would need. I've said before that there are some people that really do hear about what the Arabs have done and said, and what the neighbors to the Arabs have done and said. I have said before that these people hear this and they really do believe what they've heard and read. They've heard that the Arabs swept into Black Africa and put swords to the necks of the kind-hearted people and said, believe in Allah or die. Well, that seems like something that would happen simply because, on average, even Black Arabs are a little bit lighter skinned than the average tropical African. I say average because there's a lot of variation, but it sounds realistic to us because of what we went through dealing with Europeans. So we hear this story and we think, okay, well, you know, the pale Arab would do that because they're not us. They're not as dark as us. And colorism flows one way internationally speaking. It is against whoever is darker and to the favor of whoever is paler. That's the international colorism. And it only has met that backlash pretty much in the United States, by extension, Canada, and then to a certain extent, the UK. And I found out recently that it's gone even into South Africa. I'm glad there's a backlash, but the pendulum swung pretty far the other way. But because this is what happened with the Europeans, and because they looked at us and said, well, you're black because you don't really have a soul, but we're going to try to pour a Christian soul into you. We have no problem looking back at history and believing a narrative that didn't happen. I've said that there are people who really do genuinely think this, and I don't blame people who have no reason to think otherwise. There was a time when I also thought this, and I admit it. There was a time when I thought that it must be like this. There was a time when I thought that anybody that was paler than us and was in Africa was bad news. There was a time that I thought that the Arabs must have had racist poetry against us, even though they started from black people. I factored that in. I thought, okay, well, they started from us, but as soon as they started getting paler and their hair started falling out, they must have developed colorism against the Africans from which they came. And so therefore it only makes sense they would have racist poetry against black people and that they actually started it. I later found out that it wasn't them. What I later found out was that in actuality, they didn't start this as far as racist poetry against black people goes. Assalamu alaikum bot la dola. Shlonik, man. Kemonachin. I later found out that in actuality, Persians, it was attributed or explained as Arabic poetry, but apparently it had to do with Persians. That's what I later found out. But, you know, we don't really differentiate between them. So there was a time I believed the same propaganda that the Arabs were just as bad as the white man, or a little bit better, maybe, and that they had forced Islam down our throats. An Ethiopian Christian told me that the Arabs swept through Ethiopia and held babies and put swords to the necks of babies and said to the mothers, believe in this or we'll cut your babies' heads off. And so the mothers accepted it, and therefore Islam spread in Ethiopia. And I heard this and I thought, yeah, I guess that's true. It sounded true to me. I had no reason to disbelieve it. By the time I heard this, I had already taken some, black conscious history classes taught by a Rastafarian who himself seemed to really believe this stuff. Then I later found out that, in fact, Arabs ain't started, some Persians probably started the poetry. But I also found out that that's not how Islam got in Africa. I'm going to tell you some places where it has gone with no conquest. Now, some are going to say, look, we already know it was spread by the sword, and they make it sound like some kind of cream cheese you put on a bagel, spread by the sword. But in actuality, there are places to which Islam was spread by the sword. And I don't apologize for that, because it is a political system, and political systems do, in fact, annex each other. And when it happened in Africa, we didn't say anything about it. And when it happened in Europe, we said that's their business. But nations do stretch and grow into empires as much as possible. That can be good or bad depending on how they're governed. What I'm getting at here is that as a political system, it did spread its boundaries by the sword militarily, for the most part. However, there was never a case where it was forced from person to person by the sword, because that wasn't a valid conversion. You don't want a bunch of people who claim to believe what you do, but they're forced to, because then you can't rely on them later on when you're attacked by enemies. They're going to be the first ones to ally themselves with your enemies against you if you do this. So from person to person, the religion could not spread by the sword, because a forced conversion is obviously not a conversion. That's understood between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. If we black people did have a Wakanda tomorrow, I would not apologize, because we spread a Wakandan empire within the continent, but definitely outside of the continent, and colonized somebody else. I would not apologize for it. I would apologize if we did this to people that had not done this to us, But if Wakanda goes and colonizes Europe, Australia, Israel, these nations that are responsible for oppression and colonization of others, I would say, great. What the hell took so long? By the time some black folks ruled some other people that were paler and did so with an iron fist, especially those that did it to others and took their resources and took their harvest and did none of the work to extract these resources or to grow the harvest. I mean, one good term deserves another. But that's the angry black man in me talking. When it comes to this faith, that's not what happened. I found out about this before I even became Muslim. I found out that the so-called Islamic slave trade, which was never really Islamic to begin with, which was actually just a slave trade, actually never singled out any particular race. And that the only slave trade that ever singled out a race was the European transatlantic slave trade, wherein whites could not be slaves and black folks had to prove that they weren't slaves in order to be free, could still possibly be sold into slavery after being free. And everybody else was somewhere in between. That was only the white Christian transatlantic slave trade, no other. As a matter of fact, where I live, theoretically, you could have been a wealthy black person and you could have owned slaves that were paler than you. But Ladola, when this is over, man, you got to let me know where you are. And if you're here, man, then let's see if we can link up tomorrow, inshallah. I'll tell you what, G. Wilkers, I think if you left a comment under one of my videos, probably, either one of them, then chances are I could find you there and then I would be able to send you my email. Even without knowing your email, I think I'd be able to send you my email to where nobody else but you could see it. I went through this as well. This idea that pretty much everybody that's not us is an enemy. And I remember one day I met a Colombian and I was a bit rude to him in the beginning because I assumed that he was going to also be racist. But when he asked me where I was from, and I proudly said Africa, I was sitting with an Ethiopian friend of mine. I proudly said I'm from Africa. He's from the East and I'm from the West. His eyes lit up in joy. And he said, in my country, there's a part of it where they still speak the African language. I don't know the name of it, but they still speak it there. And he said it with a pride, and I was shocked to see this coming from him. I mean, he was quite pale. But I actually felt guilty at that point. I can't say I felt ashamed. I don't actually have a sense of embarrassment anymore, but I felt guilty because I was about to be hostile, even worse with him. But then he said this with such a pride. And I had to remember that there's no instinct that comes with being lighter skinned to make you anti-black. I had to remember everybody paler than us is not born with some instinct to be against us. So fortunately, I learned more history and I came to understand that that there was not this conquest of Africa. And I found out how Islam had come into Ethiopia. I found out that that was actually the first hijrah, the first migration before there was ever a Medina, not before Medina existed, but before it was known as Medina. It was at that time still called Yathrib, and it was, by today's standards, it was a village. It wasn't really even on anybody's map. Before that migration, there was Abyssinia. And that what really happened was that some of the Meccans who had become Muslim fled to Abyssinia. And when, oh God, I only get phone calls around this time. Hold on, y'all. Sorry about this. Hold on. All right, folks, sorry about that. I swear, the only time, you'll know how sometimes I'm recording and you hear this wind noise and y'all want to tell me, man, do this over again. Well, that's what the phone is like too. Oh man, I told her, do not leave home without your key. What if you come back home before I do one day and I'm not there? What do you do then? So she wound up locking herself out accidentally again. So anyway, thank you all for waiting and giving me time to do that. Appreciate that. So as you all see, there's been a lot of misinformation that's floated around about this. And it's been directed at black folks, largely, to get us inflamed against a group of people that, while they've not been our friends, they haven't necessarily been our enemies either. Now, Botla Dola, please put a 1 in the chat if you're still here. Okay, Botla Dola, I think he's not in. All right, no, Abdullah, sorry about that. I didn't doze off. What happened is that, see, I've been telling my wife for the longest, and I've told her, when you leave here, don't leave without your key, because the outside door closes and it locks automatically. So to get back in, you got to take your key with you. Now, I don't walk out without my key in my pocket. And she always puts her keys somewhere, forgets where she puts them, and then she leaves. And usually we're together and she says, do you have the key? So the last few times I've said to her, don't even ask me that. I think I'm going to start forgetting the keys. And if we get locked out, we just get locked out. Because I've been telling you to not just, no, don't get used to doing that. So she did it today. She went somewhere else. And I just happened to be home when she called. Because otherwise, she would have locked herself out. But no, I didn't close off. It's just, you know how Abdullah bin Bobby, at times I'm recording and the wind kicks up and it interferes because I'm recording outside. When I start to record, that's not the problem. It's not that. She's just not as careful as I am. That's what that is. But you know how sometimes I'm recording and the wind kicks up. When I start to record, there's no wind. Usually the wind comes when I start to record. And I know I don't have control over the weather. So I don't believe in coincidence. Not in the least bit. So anyway, there's been this information that has been directed at black folks largely. And I'm going to tell you all one of the possible reasons for it. Gay Edgar Hoover, former director of the FBI, used to be with the Attorney General's office. And there was a time when they were responsible for not only prosecution of federal crimes, but also the investigations of them. And then the FBI took the investigations while the Attorney General could then focus on the prosecution. So, and as a matter of fact, they were not really formulated. The FBI was not formulated for organized crime per se. The FBI was formulated because of Marcus Garvey. Now, Marcus Garvey he talked about repatriation, and he had a type of spirituality that was liberating. But what people don't know is that Marcus Garvey got his ideas from a Muslim from Sudan and Egypt named Muhammad Duce Ali. So there's always been a relationship between Islam and black liberation, and it's older than the United States itself. There's something called the Wolof Rebellion. The Wolof Rebellion, I mentioned this before. The Wolof Rebellion was actually the first slave revolt in the Americas. And it was started by Muslims, largely from the Wolof tribe. So the Wolof Muslims were enslaved under the Spaniards. And they were enslaved in Santo Domingo, which, of course, as we now know, is the Dominican Republic. At that time, it was the Dominican Republic. I think it had yet to be partially taken by the French and become the colony of Haiti. So it was 1521, I believe, Yeah, 1521. They started that revolt on Christmas Day of 1521. And so these were Muslims, and they came together with the native Taino under the chief named Enriquillo, and they started fighting back. That's what that was. Now, this was the first slave revolt in the Americas, and it was black folks, Muslim black folks from West Africa, who were about to go up against Spaniards armed with armor and guns. And mind you, the way the Spaniards killed the Taino, well, that was gruesome and bloody itself. I mean, that's enough to give me nightmares. These Wolof were about to go up against them anyway. And keep in mind, we know how afraid we are of really big dogs. I don't mean them little strays that we see oftentimes, but you know, a really big dog like a Rottweiler or Mastiff, we are petrified, and we should be. It makes sense. They are dangerous at that size. These Wolof weren't swayed even by them. If they were going to confront something that we are deathly afraid of, dogs the size of small lions, do you think that Arabs could have swept through West Africa and forced Islam down their throats? Unwillingly. What y'all think? Tell me in the chat y'all think that could have happened. I found out that Islam got into Ethiopia through the first Hijra. I found out that apparently from that same Hijra, any Somali, you ask them, they'll tell you that's how it got to Somalia too. So the question is going to be which route, because you see there's a port city in Ethiopia that, and the people there claim that the first Muslims, and when I say the first ones, I mean the first ones after it was revealed to Muhammad, peace and prayers be to him. Because if you ask us, we're going to tell you that Islam started with the creation of the universe. And then amongst human beings, it started with the creation of Adam. That's what we're going to tell you. But starting with the revelation given to Muhammad, peace and prayers be upon him, the first Muslims after that went in through a route that's not really sure. There's debate as to which route they went, which port city. One is in Somalia, the other one is in Ethiopia. My suspicion is that they didn't all get the same boat, so they went through different boats and had to take different routes, and that's why there are some that are said to have gone through one and others that are said to have gone through the other. And there are graves there in these port cities. And there are old masajid, they're ruins now, but the Qibla was facing Jerusalem at that time, not facing Mecca. So apparently East Africa came in this way. Now you ask them, when did the Arabs invade? And they will tell you that never happened. No such thing. At that time, they couldn't. After Islam, they didn't, and they couldn't. And as a matter of fact, if you really want to know the truth, some of us love to jump on the Somalis and other East Africans that are Muslim and say, you're just a fake wannabe Arab. But the real truth is, if it hadn't been for them, the Mongols would have gotten into Africa. Now, I think the Mongols would have gotten wiped out by malaria, too, if they had gone into the interior. But the fact is, we'll never find that out firsthand, because when they tried to get into Africa, they made the mistake of trying to come in through the Horn, which was and is Somalia. And the Somalis, who had no central government at that time either, still got together and whooped the Mongols. So the Mongols got their butts whooped in Africa 2 times. Once Ain Jalut in Egypt. But another time, I don't remember if it was before or after, but I think it was before Ain Jalut, they got their butts whooped at the eastern coast in Somalia by Somalis, who at that point were Muslims. Now, if the Mongols who had defeated the Arabs could not defeat the Somalis, what makes you think the Arabs were going to go into Eastern Africa and conquer? And if they couldn't do it in Eastern Africa, what makes you think they could extend themselves across into West Africa and conquer? The way it got into West Africa was there were some who went for business, and the people, the kings actually took on Islam based on the teachings themselves, and then the people took it on after the kings. A similar thing happened in Malaysia and Indonesia, and those other parts of Southeast tropical Asia next door to them, like the southern Thailands and southern Philippines. Actually, at one time, most of the Philippines were Muslim. And they did not have to be conquered by the Arabs. They hardly ever saw Arabs. Now, I mentioned this in my last upload, in which I said I might have a live stream. And what I said was, if you know all of this and you still got issues with Islam, it's probably going to be because there are certain vices that you want to indulge in. And if you want to indulge in these vices, that makes you human. If you insist on doing them, it makes you wrong. But if you just want to indulge in them, that makes you human. You're just human. There are going to be vices we want to indulge in, and it's different for different people. But I want us, since most of us aren't going to accept it, I get it. I just want us to be honest with ourselves about why we don't want to accept it. For some of us, it's nothing more than what the Arabs did or what we heard they did. Turns out it really ain't that bad. They're not our friends, but they're not our enemies either. They're kind of like an ill-mannered grandchild that doesn't really respect the bond between grandparents and grandchildren. Yeah, that's what they're like. And to them, we're like the old, ugly grandparent that they don't want to admit as a grandparent because they're still in the childish state. But by the same token, their own grandkids, the Europeans, now they're really buck wild. We know that. Everybody suffered from them. They've even suffered from each other. And there are people who really think that, but when you throw it out the window, they're the ones who say, oh, well, in that case, then, so let me read and learn about what the actual religion teaches. Most of us, though, while having a grudge with these less black peoples that are associated with Islam and even tend to forget our history, our solid history in it, still have other issues that are holding us back. Liquor, weed, nicotine. I'm not going to say caffeine, but fornication, stunting at the club, backbiting, mess, or just the propensity for violence that, while they could say is fine in Islam and actually makes you a better Muslim, they know deep down really is not the case. And I just want people to be honest about it. Walaikum salam, Jaws. A. LaRue, you said your ancestors on mom's side rebelled in a colony in the Bahamas. I said, we've got that history of it. But what happens, A. LaRue, is that there are people that come along and they try to act like Islam made us better slaves, just like Christianity did. When in fact, neither one really did a good job of dampening revolutions. And people are going to lie to us about these rebellions to a certain extent. And George, since I know you're here, I'm going to ask you, do you know any African-American Muslims or Black British Muslims that feel inferior to Arabs or Pakistanis or Indians or Afghans or Persians? I'll give you time to type it in the chat because I know you'll tell the truth. Abdullah bin Bobby, same with you, man. Tell us if you know of any that are like that. And tell us if this has ever been told to you that you're supposed to, like, has any black person ever told you that you're supposed to feel inferior to them or acted like they were some sort of automatic reference and some sort of automatic source from which we had to take? Well, I'm waiting on y'all to write these, though. I will say this, that what I want is for us to be honest. For those that just aren't going to believe and are going to accept, even if it's the medicine for us, I just want them to be honest with themselves. And that's more important even than being honest with everybody else around you. I just want us to be honest with ourselves. Those of us that ain't going to believe, let's just admit what it is. You want to stunt at the club and you know you can't do that. You want to get your drink on and you know that if you accept Islam, you can't do that. You want that ham sandwich and you know that if you accept Islam, you can't do that. You may want to fornicate, dig her guts out. As Steph would say, dig out her guts till she busts. But you know that if you are Muslim, you can only do that when you're married. And so we just need to be honest about what it is. Because in all honesty, any path requiring self-discipline does not appeal to us, and that does not make us any worse than everybody else. It doesn't appeal to most people on the planet. Very few people in any country join the militaries. Very few people in any country even go into law enforcement for that matter. And what is the reason? Even when the job is not difficult, the fact is that the basic training and getting into shape is going to be grueling for many people. And so many people say, I'm not going to live a life like that. I'm not going to live a barracks life, not even for a short time. I don't need that to develop myself as a person. And to a certain extent, that's true. Most of us don't need that. Most of us don't have to have a barracks life in order to make ourselves better people. But to prepare ourselves for certain jobs that carry certain power and weight with them, yes, we do. We would need that. It may not make you a better person, but it would make you fit for a particular job. Well, many of us think that the life of a Muslim is much more difficult than what it is, because many of us cannot imagine a life without sleeping late, without alcohol, without fornicating, without smoking cigarettes or weed. Most of us can't imagine that now. I mean, you can live that way. It's actually very easy. To tell the truth, after about 2 months of getting rid of these vices, after about 2 months, you really don't want to go through them again, especially when you see what's happened long term to people that kept on doing these things. If we're honest about that, that's really what's happening to those of us that have given this up. If we're honest, we'll tell you that, yeah, we are squares, because it's not an easy thing to go back to. I mean, believe it or not, fornication is difficult. Because even if somebody propositions you, you're going to think, is this a setup for a robbery? Why should I trust this? I mean, why wouldn't God punish me as soon as I got started if I decided to indulge in this? Why wouldn't he punish me? I'd be walking around for days worried what's going to happen now. Is a car going to hit me? Am I going to get a disease? In this country, it's, am I going to get arrested and then find out that I'm a parent? So it actually becomes difficult to go back to these things. You stop smoking, you know what? You don't like the smell of cigarette smoke after you've given it up and you've beaten that addiction. And it takes about 3 days, really. If you go cold turkey, it's about 3 days the nicotine gets out your system. 5 days, you're sick from the smell of it. It's completely gone, completely metabolized out your system, but you got to go through them 3 days of hell. You're going to be in a bad mood and snap on people. But people don't want to go through these things at times, and they don't think they can. Some of you simply say, I'm not going to fast for 30 days. When Ramadan comes, I'm not going to do it. Now, if you can't, you can't. If you have an illness, then you cannot fast. That's not your fault. But there are times when it requires self-discipline, and you're going to be frustrated by some things on occasion, but you're not living your whole life being frustrated. It's actually a life where you spend less time being frustrated than if you were living a different life in which you indulge in your vices, because the vices are expensive. So you throw out that liquor, you don't want to drink anymore after a while, but then you start looking at what you're saving. You stop stunting at the club. After a while, you get offended when somebody says, hey man, let's go hit up the club. You get sick of that. And then you're looking at the money that you're saving on the admission and on the drinks. And let's say you stunt at the club only because you're trying to find someone of the opposite gender. You know, you're trying to find somebody. That's where you go looking for love. Well, obviously you ain't gonna find it in the club. But when you're not in the club anymore, you realize how dumb that was. And you start saying, you know what? Don't even talk to me about that club life anymore. Stunt on them for what? What do I get after I'm done stunting on them? Who are we stunting for? You're just spinning wheels and not going anywhere because that's what you're used to doing. So, all right, looking at the answers, Jaw said absolutely not. I've seen them wanting to work with I've seen black Muslims wanting to work with Arab Muslims. I haven't seen a sense of inferiority or superiority between the two. Now, Abdullah said, the only Africans that I've had problem with since being Muslim, some Yoruba, but they were beefing with me even before Islam. Most were in Medina, one house and some Somalis. So For those of you who want to say, well, there's this racial hierarchy in Islam and it's encoded in the religion, that's crap. As a matter of fact, racial hierarchy is coded against. There is no such thing, and we were explicitly told this. I'm not going to sit up and tell you that every Muslim understands it, but what I am going to tell you is that if you're Muslim and you come across a Muslim that forgets that there's no racial hierarchy, you already know he's ignorant, and you have every grounds to sit up and tell him, man, you ignorant as hell. You don't know what you're talking about. And that's what they don't tell you. And that's because, again, this revolt that happened kind of set the tone. This Wolof Rebellion of 1521, Christmas of 1521. That set the tone. And ever since then, there has been no divorce between Islam and Black liberation. Fast forward to when America was in its pre-modern era. Let's say around Prohibition time and the time that between the time that Marcus Garvey was here and Prohibition. Let's look at what happened. J. Edgar Hoover, who turned out to be Black, by the way, he actually said, apparently it was in the 40s that he said this, but I was told that he said, and I can't prove or disprove that he said, that his single fear for the United States was no foreign entity, but that the indigenous Negro or that the American Negro would accept Orthodox Islam. That's what was told to me, but I was never able to prove it or disprove it for that matter. What I do know is that COINTELPRO, according to the documents themselves, spoke of the need for there to not be a Black Messiah-like figure that could electrify the masses. And that's in their own words. We do know, though, that apparently these fake movements propped up around the time that Orthodox Muslims who still, Black American Orthodox Muslims who lived in Cleveland and in Philadelphia and along the Gullah Geechee coast of the United States, the coast of Florida and South Carolina. Yeah, there were some Gullah Geechee that were Muslim. Elijah Poole, later known as Elijah Muhammad, came from Sandersville, Georgia. Sandersville is not that long of a drive from that coastline where the Gullah Geechee people live. He had to have known about some of them being Muslim because everybody knew about some of them being Muslim at that time, but they were still somewhat isolated too. May not have been a long drive, but there were parts of it you could not, there were islands you could not get to by driving at that time. Some you still can't get to by driving. Around this time, when communication was becoming a lot easier and quicker compared to what it had been before, it seems like that's where this effort came, or that's when this effort got started to introduce other movements in the name of Islam, like Noble Drew Ali's Moore Science Temple. That's a different religion. Then later on, of course, the NOI under Elijah Muhammad or Elijah Poole, which is a different religion. I'm not saying they didn't do good things for Black people. What I'm saying is that they introduced a different religion to do it and called it Islam. Now, these two seem to pop up around that time. And the question will be, what is the motive? When you do an investigation, and Abdullah bin Bab is right, by the way, some of the Gullahs still recite Fatiha in their ceremonies. I actually saw one of them reciting that in English. It was directly the English translation of Surah Fatiha. And he was doing this in a storytelling ceremony in one of the Gullah cultural centers somewhere close to the coast of, I think it was close to the coast of Georgia, but might have been South Carolina. It was in their territory, though. You're right, Abdullah bin Babi. I saw the footage myself. I'm backing you up on that. I'm confirming that. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was not completely Black, I know, but I'm just saying that he had Black ancestry and he hid it. And there's a documentary on that on YouTube. So don't take my word for that either. It's a lot to research, so it's going to take a long time. But I'm just saying the information is there. Apparently, he had courthouses burned down in some parts of Mississippi where these records would have proven this about him. Because mind you, yeah, okay, right, he was only partially black, but at that time, that was enough. And if this had gotten out to the public, he would have no longer been director of anything. We know that. All this power he had on other people would have been completely undone. He could have dirt on presidents about their personal lives that could have ruined their presidencies. His power would have been gone because the stigma of blackness was just that deep. That's what America was like. And yet the same America benefits when you and I sit up and start blaming Arabs for things they did not do. And mind you, I don't let them off the hook for things that they have actually done. The brainwashing, the skin bleach, the European beauty standards, calling us slaves. I don't let them off the hook for these things. But you've heard me say before, I got to be balanced. I'm not allowed to blame people for things they didn't do. Speaking of which, I have to give credit. Art Cathy came out and made a statement about 7 hours ago. She wrote a statement, and I think in the discussion tab of her own page, explaining. Actually, I found out that some of y'all had made investments with Kwesi, and he's no longer the business manager. Yeah, she pretty much came out and said it. So to be fair, I can't go in on her anymore because she did at least make the statement. And she did at least get in front of this thing at the very least. The only thing I can say is she can speak on scammers if she's experienced with that. She just needs to do it in a way that does not indict the Gambian population as a whole. That's what I can say about her. So I got to apply this to myself too. So if I'm not going to sit up here and pour blame on her, I'm not going to pour blame on Arabs where it doesn't belong, just to be fair. But you got to look and see who benefits from something. And if we've had everything other than Islam being pushed forward in front of us and make it to the realm of entertainment, if everything except for Islam has been pushed in front of us, we got to ask ourselves, what is it that, number one, what are they trying to not put in front of us? And that's Islam, like the way it was revealed previously, not the way it's been doctored up for the Moore Science Temple or the NOI, shout out to Def Rocker, or the way it's been, doctored up for nothing personal, but for the 5%ers, calling human beings God. I don't mean these things. I'm talking about the way that Islam has been revealed. They will push these other things. And then when you become an actual Muslim and you start touring and you give da'wah and people start accepting, they arrest you. That's exactly what happened to Amir Muhaddith. Amir Junaid Muhaddith. Y'all know him as Loon. He used to rap with Bad Boy. He just got released early because of COVID. But he had to plead guilty because they were going to put him in life. They were going to put him there for life if he pled not guilty and fought the charges. What happened? He introduced some people to each other. They later on, independently of him, began to, at first I thought that one of them propositioned him about some kind of drug delivery or something. He just shut up and didn't say anything. But he later on told a story a few days after he got out. And he said they apparently had a conversation with each other independent of him. But they were both told that if they would finger him, then they could go home, or at least go home early. So they did. And then the Fed said to him, we already got their testimonies. That's enough to convict you. If you plead not guilty and you take us to trial, we're going to put you in for life. You'll never see your kids again, short of a visiting room. That's what wound up happening. Now, why did they do this to him and they don't do this to anybody else? They did this to him because when he was touring and telling people about this, they were beginning to accept. But it was also because a lot of African Americans were learning about Islam through him. He had time. He didn't have to work a 9 to 5, so he had time to explain it to people. And so he did that with this free time that he has as a blessing. He used that to bless other people, black or not. And you know what wound up happening? His own people also listened. Most of his family accepted Islam. Parents, his spouse, his kids. That didn't even happen in my case. Ain't nobody Muslim in my family but me and my daughters. I've had some others that were Muslim and they left. So I'm just going to tell y'all straight, obviously that's one thing that they don't want you to figure out. They don't want you to understand that our salvation is going to lie in this affair that our ancestors, not all, but many of our ancestors accepted on its own merits back home. That means that if they were worshiping ancestors before this message reached them, they heard the message and they said, well, our ancestors actually never asked us to worship them. And if they're going to judge us, who's going to judge them? So, yeah, a message from God trumps a message from the ancestors because they themselves said that God was the creator. So this stands to reason. They accepted it. And what happened in West Africa itself was that tribes that were not the same, but they were Muslim, began to get along with each other better in many cases. Now, it is true that some of them do say, you all are our servants and we're your masters. But these tribes, they say this as a joke now when they can get along better. Mustafa Briggs actually knows more about this than I do. I forgot which tribe said this about who. I think it was the Serer that said this about the Wolof, or the Wolof that said this about the Serer. I forgot the order, but the point I'm making is that they can marry. You want to see some mixed Africans, tribally mixed Africans, go into West Africa, especially the Muslim parts. The friend of mine that introduced me to my ex in North Africa was Senegalese. He was tribally mixed, and that was nothing. You don't blink twice at that. You may belong to the tribe of your dad, but you're still tribally mixed, so to speak. And that they don't think twice about it. The question is, were both tribes Muslim? So what this means is that Africa, West Africa specifically, was not even in a lot of tribal turmoil, especially the Muslim parts. Y'all want to know something else too? When they were destabilizing the interior using the coast, one of the things they used was alcohol, because many tribes that were worshiping ancestors had to involve alcohol in order to do it. Guess what? That means that you could get some people to go into the interior and kidnap others in exchange for alcohol. Because see, they could make palm wine, but the Europeans at this point were mass producing rum. So they had a steadier supply of it. And they could use that to trade so people would not have to make their own palm wine for their own worship ceremonies. They didn't have to wait for it to ferment properly. They just, okay, you know what, you just want me to kidnap somebody? Yeah, okay, fine. So they go kidnap some people, turn them in exchange for enough alcohol to perform several ceremonies. I kid you not, this actually did happen. Do you know where they encountered some of the most difficulty in doing this? It was Muslim areas. You couldn't do this with a Muslim. You couldn't go to a Muslim and say, look, I want you to kidnap some people, but here's some alcohol in exchange. He would look at you and say, that's not even currency, man. In order to get a Muslim to go in and kidnap some people, you may have been able to bribe him with something, but you couldn't use alcohol to do it, more than likely. And in many cases, with Muslims or not, they had to use hostages. We got your wife and kids right there in that fortress over there. Now you can ransom them, but you're going to have to bring us other people to do it. Now, in that case, most of us would say, you know what? Okay, fine. I'm going to go ahead and kidnap somebody to free my wife and baby, because that's your wife and baby. And that's a different topic for another day. But yeah, I heard of Ahmadou Bamba Defraka. I didn't hear a lot of details, but I did hear about him. I remember that he was initially, I mean, he was eventually deported from Senegal to, I think it was Gabon. I don't know if he ever returned to Senegal or not, but I remember hearing the name and by his deportation. So what they realized was that the Muslim parts of Africa were a force to be reckoned with. The Mali Empire was one that shortly preceded Christopher Columbus's voyages. And then there was the Songhai Empire, which was, I believe, that popped up a little bit after Columbus's voyages to the Americas. But they came to understand that it was a force to be reckoned with. They knew this. And that was part of the reason that the Portuguese, when they first got started in Africa, they went into the Congo and Angola. They didn't go very close to home, which would have been easier for them in many cases. They went further south into what's now the Congo and Angola because they heard those folks were not Muslims. And that's why they got started there, where they did. So in actuality, whether on the continent or in the Caribbean or in North America or in Melanesia or in Southeast Tropical Asia or Eastern Europe, this is actually a medicinal way of life. It prevents a lot of diseases and illnesses, and it cures others, but mostly it's preventive. And I'm just going to tell y'all straight away that if it was not a solution, you wouldn't find so many people fighting against it, especially where you and I are concerned. And they know this. So the real question is going to be not, is this black enough for us or pro-black enough for us? And I'm saying this as someone that told y'all last week, I'm done with pro-blackness. I'm pro-black man at this point. I'm pro-black man at this point. But if we're going to look at what is actually going to be a solution for black people, we are still people. So what is going to be the solution for people in general? Well, that's why Islam was revealed. So I think I said enough about it. I believe so. I think I've made the point. If you're not for it, just at least be honest with yourself about what it is and why you're not for it. And just admit first to yourself. You don't even have to admit this to others, especially if you don't know them, but at least admit to yourself that it's your vices and the human laziness in the face of self-discipline being a requirement. And then at the very least, you can stop giving yourself headaches trying to convince other people, because you'll understand that, yeah, this is a solution. Definitely is. So this being said, I put the link to this live stream now in the chat. I hope you all can see it. And y'all are free to come on and ask questions and voice concerns if you can do it respectfully without blasphemy, certainly without blasphemy. I don't expect everybody to agree. I get it. But if there are questions like legitimate concerns, if you're not standing outside of this and refusing this simply because of alcohol and marijuana or cigarettes or pork chops or fornication, or gossiping and backbiting, if it's not just the way you are that's keeping you out of this, and you really got some concerns about what about the rumors of a racial hierarchy, what's the difference between this and that, feel free to come on. I put the link to this live stream or the studio link in the chat now. And if you have questions or concerns, feel free to come in. I don't know everything, but if you have a question to which I don't know the answer, I don't mind telling you I don't know. And maybe there'll be someone else here that can say, well, I know someone that does know. And we got Abdullah bin Babi Atayib, who actually studied in Medina for a while. And he studied Islam there. So there are going to be things he'll be able to help you with. And as a matter of fact, yeah, thank you, man. Abdullah, thank you for sending that. If you did send this link, then thanks a million. I'm going to see if I can pull that link up right now about Somalis fighting the slave trade. I'm waiting on that to come up at this point, because you see, this is exactly the information that we're not told. Look at Assata Shakur as an example. Assata Shakur, we all know who she is. She's still in exile in Cuba, and she's got asylum in Cuba. Even after the normalization of relations between the United States and Cuba, they were not going to, Cuba meaning, was not going to give her up. Cuba was not going to deport her back to the States to face these trials. They're just like, so she shot a cop to go free. Well, y'all should have been messing with black people. But you know that one of the people, matter of fact, I think it was more than one of those that actually broke her out of custody and helped her to escape, was a Sunni Muslim. I heard that Doroba bin Wahad was one of them. And I'm going to look up and see and try to confirm that in the next few minutes, inshallah. Let's see here. And I'm looking right now, there's nobody that's jumping in. I'm surprised. Jaws, can I ask, when you say in that sector, do you mean you mean the ones that are against Islam, and you mean the Afrocentric sector that's anti-Islamic? Is that what you mean? I'm just asking to make sure. Okay, all right. I see Abdullah bin Bobby. I see now. I got the image in front of me, but I'll ask her about him. Yusuf Mahmoud Ibrahim was the predecessor. That was the predecessor. But you know what? The funny thing is his own name is not showing up. Okay, Ahmed Yusuf. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, it says here, let me read out to you all what I'm looking at. I don't know if I can share the screen yet. I'm not that good at this. But let me go ahead and read out to you all what Abdullah bin Bobby Atayeb shared with me. Yes, Abdullah E. Doroba bin Wahad, last I heard, he's Muslim, Sunni. And I think he was Sunni at that time. As a matter of fact, Asada Shakur had even asked to be able to attend Friday prayer during her trial. It's just that in Cuba, I guess it's hard to find information on Islam to stay Muslim. That's a different topic, but yeah. So let me read you all what Abdullah bin Bobby Atayeb sent to me. Ahmed Yusuf was considered to be the most powerful king in Africa in his time. Now, his time was 1848 to 1878. Continuing, it says, he managed to gather 20,000 Somali troops and invaded the Zanzibar island near Tanzania, and he captured the islands, slaughtered all the Arabic troops, and freed the Bantu slaves. And through his military dominance, Sultan Yusuf managed to extract tribute from the Omani king in the coastal town of Lamu. So if Islam is supposed to make black people the flunkies of the Arabs and put us from the back of the bus to the back of the camel, as some of these super black Islamophobes like to say, then how does someone explain this? Now it's on Wikipedia, and you could say Wikipedia is not even, you could easily say that it's not valid. But I can ask some people here that I work with about this. There's something else too, though. There's another thing about this I want to point out. You see, you can use Wikipedia to a certain extent. You can't necessarily use it as the source because anybody can edit it, but they tend to have sources listed in there. And that's where you can go back and you can take a look at what these other sources are. So this, in fact, could be not necessarily correct, but this was in a book written in 2002 by a lady named Virginia Luling. So it's called The Somali Sultanate, the Galedi City-State over 150 years. It's got a publication number. So, and also there were, some of this was taken from Sudani archives. So there's that as well. So what I'm saying is that while Wikipedia is for those of us that are not really literate, let's be honest about it, Wikipedia is not necessarily the site itself or the source, but you can look and see what the other sources are. And I just looked to see, was this book a real book just now? And yeah, it's a real book. It was written by Virginia Lula. That's right, in 2002. Transaction Publishers is the name of the publishing company. So apparently this information comes from somewhere. So let's call this what it is. Now they took this information, it's been changed since then. So that's the funny thing. But they still say that actually that part that I read to you is still there as I look at it. So what I'm really getting at here is that, yeah, Omani is ruled by something else. I don't know much about the Ibadis, to be honest, Abdullah bin Babi. I don't know. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just don't really know much about them. I'm just saying that I'm simply saying that I'm ignorant on that. But this guy, Ahmed Yusuf Gabroon, went in and extracted tribute. Now, this is a Muslim going after some Arab so-called Muslims and putting an end to this stuff. And he freed the Bantu slaves. So when people want to sit up and say, oh, the Somalis, they hate real black people. They ain't real black people and they hate the ones who are. No, that's never been true. I know that that's a crock of shit, to be honest. Pardon my French. I know that. I've seen it firsthand. And some say, well, yeah, but you said you're light skinned and that's why they accepted you. Well, the thing is, I still have a nose wide enough to sniff out bin Laden if I was looking for him. And I still got lips big enough to kiss a classroom with one shake of my head. So I'm clearly Bantu if you look long enough. That part's obvious. So what I'm getting at here is that I'm simply saying that this narrative that we've been getting is crap. And Jaws is pointing it out rightly. That's just in general with the Pan-African community. Gentlemen, did you all know that Pan-Africanism would not be here without Islam? How many of us were aware of that? Matter of fact, the so-called father or the architect of Pan-Africanism is Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. He became a Muslim and his son is still practicing Islam in Egypt today. That's why his wife was Egyptian. So even Pan-Africanism can't be divorced from Islam. Yeah, Spike Razor, if you compare my nose with the Arabs and even Eastern Africans, yeah, my nose is pretty wide. I mean, in West Africa, my nose is average, but yeah, in East Africa, mine is pretty wide. So sometimes people have told me, oh man, go ahead and pass for something else. And that's when I say, no, my nose and lips will give me away. And I'm glad they will. But yeah, man, this is crap. We're being fed a lot of crap. This anti-Islamic narrative had to be told to us in the packaging of Islam being anti-black. It had to be told to us that way because let's be honest, what else could an Islamophobe tell you to make you get angry with Muslims in general and Arabs by extension? Or Arabs in general and Muslims by extension? What else could they have told you? See, even when the NOI said Islam is the natural religion of the black man, let me tell you how true that was, and I'm about to go deep. We've had various faiths throughout history. We've been Jewish, Christian, we've had tribal religions, and they were not all the same. We've had various belief systems. We've had monotheistic and polytheistic people in our ancestry. That's just to be expected. I get that. But by the same token, I want to say that see, back home in Africa, we didn't walk around calling ourselves black all the time. We referred to ourselves by ethnicities and linguistic groups and tribes. And a physical description would be black. But I mean, you go into Europe and their physical description is white, but they have nationalities. And before that, they had tribes and linguistic groups. That's one of the reasons that Hitler invaded a particular part of Poland. It was called the Sudetenland, and that's where they spoke German, but it was inside of Poland. And so he invaded it and took it for Germany because they have identities outside of the race. They're white when non-white people walk into the room. Understand that. Now, when it's just them, they're German, they're Italian, they're French, they're this, that, and the other, and they're rich or they're poor, they're somewhere in the middle. But see, we also in Africa, we're not walking around with this notion of black unity. And there was no reason for it at that time. No race had a notion of racial unity at that point. They didn't need it as far as they knew. Understand that. The Native Americans never had a notion of racial unity until they compared notes between different tribes. So when they said that Islam is a natural religion for the black man, when you begin to realize that black is your primary identity because it's forced upon you, yeah, naturally, guess what? The one unifying force between black people before anybody came to oppress us was Islam. Most Africans were not walking around hating each other from different tribes and fighting tribal wars like they tell us. That's not really the case. Some fought, some didn't. They didn't hate each other that much. But as far as the unity goes, that black unity came through Islam from the very beginning, even before we were calling each other black. And that actually persists until today. Because let me be honest with you. You think I would have even met my wife if I wasn't Muslim? And we're from opposite ends of Africa. And personally speaking, we're from opposite coasts outside of Africa. Personally, I was born and raised in a land further west than the western coast of Africa, and she was born and raised in a land further east than the eastern coast of Africa. You think we would know each other existed if we weren't Muslim? You think that would have happened? My close friend from Senegal that passed away introduced me to my second ex. She and I would not have known about each other if I hadn't been Muslim. If one of us was not Muslim, the other one of us would have then neither of us would have known the other one existed. You all understand what I'm getting at? People that could not have been unified, even if they weren't at war, and even if they were nice to each other and could trade and even speak each other's languages, which is fine, but people that were not even at war with each other still could not necessarily have been unified without Islam going back to ancient times in Africa. So there is no anti-black narrative or part of the revelation. That's some cultural BS that certain cultural groups have. And usually they have black blood in them, they just ain't proud of it. And I've already said before that if you want to try to explain international colorism and anti-blackness, you have to believe in the Satan. You have to believe in the devil. I don't mean even the white devil, but you have to believe in a devil that you don't see, but your subconscious mind can hear when they whisper to you. You got to believe in that. It's in the Quran. It's also in the Bible. You got to believe in that in order to understand it. Because this thing predates the knowledge of psychology. It's a phenomenon that predates mass communication and quick communication. It predates Google Translate. So how did this become so international? Not global, but how did it become so international beforehand? How is it one of the oldest things in common that many cultures shared remotely with each other? Anti-blackness, anti-melanin. But it's not a part of Islam, not at all. And Islam was the only revelation I've heard of that actually called this thing out as explicitly as it did. Because when Muhammad, peace and prayers be on him, gave his last sermon on the mount, the last sermon, and he said, the Arab and the non-Arab are no better than each other. And the white and the black, actually, he literally said the red and the black, literally. But that meant the white and the black. That pretty much meant the black and the non-black are no better than each other, except in piety. When he said that, he was telling us ahead of time that your origin does not make you better, but your piety and your fear of God, your righteousness will make you better or inferior to somebody else. But in order to be better or inferior, you got to make better or worse choices, moral choices within your control. And that's how you elevate others above yourself, because you made the worst choice, or they elevate you above themselves by making the worst choices. and you still ain't going to know everything enough. You're not going to know everything you need to know to guarantee that you are just better than somebody else. That's a very, very rare instance. There was never an anti-black narrative, and you can't sneak one in. And even when you got some of these non-black shuyukh, that's the plural of the word sheikh. Even when you have some of these non-black shuyukh that are walking around writing articles saying things like, well, if God made you dark skinned, he's testing your patience. And if he made you light skinned, then he's testing your humility. Even when they say things like that, as if to assume that it's in human nature to prefer whiter skin and disprefer darker skin, they themselves don't understand that not only is neither one better than the other, but that God did not program human beings to think that one was better than the other. You may be more accustomed to one than the other because you saw it growing up or because your parents did that. But there's no human instinct to think that one is better. That's something you got to pick up. You might pick it up before you're old enough to talk. That they've done studies that show this, that babies pick up on their parents' racial preferences by 6 months. Now, they're not talking at 6 months. We know that. They're not even walking at 6 months, but they still pick up on their parents' racial preferences at 6 months of age. But that doesn't mean that they were born with them. Some of us, since everybody's been against us, what we think is that it's an instinct. They're born with it. They can't help it. They're all our enemies. And so if a revelation is presented to you in which God has said everybody starts off as equal, you can believe in the morality of the equality, but you can't necessarily believe that human beings aren't born upped up. And no, I didn't curse right now. So there is a paranoia, a specific paranoia to black people, a blackanoia that does stop some of us from having faith in this. But I'll just help to clear this up. When you remove this, then the question is going to be, since this is a medicine, why is it that you think it won't work for you? Since there's no anti-black anything to do with this revelation, and it can't be justified in this revelation, even if the shuyukh are too, even if you find a sheikh that's too ignorant to understand that, because most of them know better. But even if there are some of them that are dumb enough to think this way, and I've met some, the fact is when you look into the faith itself, into the revelation, into the sound hadith, and into the verses themselves, this has been condemned. Now the question is, it's not in a religion, so that means that the anti-black sentiments are wrong that people have, and the people who have them are wrong. You're right for your understanding of equality. You're even right for understanding that the oppressor is the real inferior because they committed oppression of somebody else. Now the question is, this is a medicine for the oppressed, whoever they are. Why do you think that this will not work for you? And that's why I have this live stream. I put the link in the chat. If somebody wants to come along and tell me why they really believe it would not work, I'm willing to listen. I'd have Abdullah bin Bobby on, but his mic don't work. I'd have Jaws on, but he said that he's got to leave that mic for his son's education, and that's cool. I get it. So what I'm saying is that I would have more than just my own ignorant behind up here to answer your concerns and questions. Just to be fair, but I'll do what I can. And if you got questions, the link's in the chat. Does anybody need me to put the link back in again because they can't see it? Because if you need it, just tell me and I'll put it back in. Okay, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the link back in here again. Assalamu alaikum, telling Stuart. I'll put the link back in again. Now it's time to pray at this point. And I'll put this into the chat as well for people to know. So I'm putting this into the chat, what I'm about to tell y'all now. It's time to pray. So I'm going to mute my mic. But if anybody wants to jump in, they can. And when I come back, I'll unmute the mic and then I'll unmute there so they can ask whatever they want to ask. And if you don't feel comfortable coming on and you want to type it into the chat, you can still do it. And I'll answer whatever concerns that I have the answers to, inshallah. Okay, I'm putting the mic on mute now. I should be done in about 4 minutes. All right, folks, thanks for giving me that time to pray. What's happening, Green Machine? So, if, okay, so Ayla Rue, you said if not for me and, I'm sorry, if not for base Pluto and me, you still hold white women in high esteem. If we could help you to understand that they were the ones that went to African American women and told them that the men were the problem and that they needed to unite as women and throw race aside, then that's great. I'm glad I could get this understood because with no hatred towards them, certainly not just for being how they were born, we just have to give credit where it's due and also put the debits in the debit section. And they are the demographic that introduced this. And as a matter of fact, Gloria Steinem admitted that the CIA paid her to do this in order to neutralize the civil rights movement or the after effects of the civil rights movement. I haven't been able to find a record of her confession, but it's been independently confirmed for me by two people that, two people that themselves attributed it to two different sources. So one got it from one source, another one got it from another source. So that's why I take the conclusion right now that she was in fact paid, and she confessed to being paid by the CIA to do this until other evidence comes up otherwise. I don't say to hate white women because they're white or because they're women. I don't even say to hate them really, but I do say that they're dangerous. And this is a question that I have had asked to me by other people. So I'll address it now in front of you all, since nobody's asking any questions. The question being asked to me is, well, why would you say, tell black men to leave white women alone if you're a Muslim and that's not allowed? Now, first off, Islamically speaking, an individual is allowed to have her or his own preferences. The parents are not allowed to enforce their preferences on the offspring. This means that I'm not allowed to enforce my preference on my daughters or my son. That applies to me too, and I confess to that. When I tell my children to avoid marrying Caucasians and to avoid marrying Arabs and Indians and Pakistanis and Afghans and Persians, I don't tell them to avoid this because they're not allowed to like them or see them as equal. I tell them to avoid this for their own safety, because this is something that was forced on us. This is not something we forced on them. This is something that other groups, this is not something that was forced on them by us. We never looked at them and said, well, you look inferior because your nose is thinner, your lips are thinner, and your hair is straighter, and your skin is lighter. So therefore you don't qualify to marry us. Ew, we don't want our grandchildren to look like you. We didn't do this to anybody. That's one thing that's been universal with black people. Universally speaking, black folks have not taken exception to interracial marriages. We've had exception at times to intertribal and interreligious and intercultural or international marriages, but not interracial. This is not something that I've heard of black folks doing anywhere, not even just in Africa, but even in Melanesia. Scratch the Americas, because most of us are in the Americas by force. A few of us were here before were there before the Europeans. I'm not there anymore, but scratch the Americas. Let's look at Africa and Melanesia, those South Pacific islands with black people, and ancient Australia. This is never something that black folks had an issue with. This was always something that non-blacks had issues with when they were looking at us, and that they themselves did not have issues with when they were looking at whites. It's always been that way. So when I tell my kids this, it is because even if they find an individual that is not biased against them, that individual may still have been raised with biases, and that individual is going to be bringing racist in-laws with anti-black sentiments. And they're not going to have the same sentiments against white folks. And that's why I tell this to my kids. Islamically speaking, I should not have to tell this to them. But unfortunately, I have to tell this to them because other groups of people are telling this to their children. So this is a valid question. Why would I say this if I'm Muslim and it's not allowed? Well, it is not allowed, true. But since everybody else beat us to the punch, I'm simply saying, hey, let's protect ourselves because now we know everybody else's attitudes towards us. And even the individuals that are exceptions still bring racist relatives with them. And we don't bring racist relatives with us. Why don't we? I had a talk with the driver yesterday about this. And he said, we don't have the same racism that y'all have in America. We just don't marry, that's all. We can have dinner together, be friends. We're actually brothers as Muslims. We just don't marry each other. And I told him, I understand that. And as long as both sides agree, that's fine. But my question is it okay for us to refuse to marry you and we do so because you're white? And most whites don't understand why we would think that way, but they still think that way about us. And therein lies the problem. That means they still think that there's something normal about themselves and something less than normal about us. Therein lies that subconscious racism. We're not required to respect that. The fact that you all can have this idea, but you can't understand why someone else would have it about you, actually makes you all inferior. So therefore, we have to ask why we should marry you, not why one of you should marry us. That should never be a question. So if I see a black Gulf Arab with a white Gulf Arab, my question should be why the black person married the white one. Just like your question would be why the white one married the black one. And even then, my thinking is strictly reactionary. And to his credit, I'm not quoting this verbatim, I'm telling you what the overall strain of the conversation was. And to his credit, he actually admitted that that was true, that I was right, that I was just being fair. There's another tribe where I used to live, the tribe that took me in. They defended me from another tribe they're related to, because the other tribe said that bald-headed black American guy is a racist. He's got problems with white people. And the tribe that took me in actually said to them, to their own relatives, no, that bald-headed black American guy is a Muslim and he's sick of racism and he's against it. So when he returns the favor, you can't deal with it. And that's why we stopped being the same tribe as you officially, even though we come from you. It was stuff like this from the past. When we would accept foreigners, you said, look at you, this clan is accepting foreigners. Our numbers grew equal to yours, so we became another tribe because of this attitude from you, and you're doing it again. I didn't expect to be the subject of a debate between the family. They don't hate each other. I'm glad they don't. I don't want them fighting each other. I don't even want there to be so much as a fist fight. But from my understanding, one specific household from the larger tribe to whom the first one's related, and several households of the tribe that took me in got into this debate. Not so much that I'm that important. That's not it. I didn't want that to happen. What I'm saying is that they got into this debate because the larger tribe, the source tribe, if you will, still could not get that people are equal, even if they don't hate anybody. They still had a hard time remembering and fully understanding and digesting the concept of human equality. And the tribe that took me in was very good about that. And that's part of why they took me in. And the white Canadian Muslim guy that came with me to that town, we started working there at the same time and were housed in the same place. And we were roommates for a while and we both knew the family. They didn't take him in. He didn't spend as much time with him, which is one thing. They didn't have anything against him, but he didn't spend as much time with him. He wasn't making as much of an effort to actually learn the language in a practical manner as I was. And the other thing too was I simply reached out to them and I asked them, look, what's your family history like? I mean, you know, what is the history of your people? Who are your allies? Who are your enemies? How do y'all relate to these other tribes? And I'll tell y'all what, you know, what it's like in mine. My tribe, as they would understand that the Creoles are my tribe. So I explained to them, I'm a Creole. We're part of the African-American population. We're a subset. People think that you got to be mixed to be Creole. Most of us are mixed, African-Americans, period. But if you're Creole, you got a white ancestor on record. That's really the main difference. And there's an inheritance of wealth and education. That's all. That's what that is. That's the history of my folks, the history of my people, and the history of my tribe within. Creoles actually descend from Senegal, Mali, and Gambia. We descend from Muslim ancestors. Most of us were forced into Catholicism under slavery in the United States. That's what I tell you. That's what I told him. And we developed a sympathy because they protected people of smaller tribes that used to get picked on by other tribes. They bring them in under their protection. They didn't marry people from those tribes. But by the same token, they would not harm them and they would protect them from somebody else who would harm them. And so therefore, I was lucky that I met them and they were lucky they met me. And these were a group of people that had seen the movies from America where, the black man is the criminal. They'd seen the 80s movies in which we were the criminals, or we were really highly loyal sidekicks to white folks, white heroes. Never fully independent heroes of our own. They saw these movies, but they did something that was very important. When they met me, they took a wait and see approach. Wait and see what he's like. And before you knew it, by the time the weather got warm, because this was in the winter that I met them, by the time the weather got warm, they had taken me into the tribe. We'd learned each other's histories. And they were looking at me like, hey, man, what's wrong with the Canadian guy over there, the white Canadian? Even though he's Muslim, what's wrong with him? What's happening with him? He got attitude issues. And I had to take up for him. I had to take up for him. And I didn't mind doing it. Because I knew that I'd learned over a while that the white Canadian had been traumatized by his own people. Because when he became Muslim, he didn't get the reception from his white family that we get when we become Muslim as black people. See, when we become Muslim as black people, our families don't agree, but do they kick us out? Anybody tell me, any of the Muslims in the audience, tell me, did your black family members kick you out of the family after you became Muslim? Or because you became Muslim? Did they do that? Any Muslim, excuse me. No, actually, I would apologize, but that was kind of a good one. I don't know if y'all could hear through the microphone, but it was one of those rumbling burps, but it was short. I would brag about it, but I'm not sure if the sound went through. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Any Muslims in the audience, tell me, when you became Muslim, did your black family members kick you out the family? Because I can tell you, the white Canadian guy, that's what he'd been through. So he was traumatized. He was still somewhat shaken up. His brothers had fist fought him as adults. He said in both cases they were fighting and throwing. In one case they were in a car and they damaged the interior. And the other case, fighting his other brother, they were outside next to cars and they were throwing each other into the cars and injuring each other. And the day he left Canada to move out here, the day he left, he got a ride from one of those brothers. And he thought that they were going to reconcile. And that brother took him to downtown Montreal, which is far from the airport, and kicked him out of his car. Not even at the airport. Take your bags and fit the guck out my Jeep. Find your own way to the airport. I kid you not. That's how this man was treated by his white family for becoming Muslim. His mother was the only one that didn't kick him out. So when this tribe, all right, so Jaws did not get kicked out. Yeah, they throw shade, that does happen, but as far as an actual expulsion, we generally don't go through that. That's why I was asking. And others, tell me what y'all been through. But see, and I went through that too. We go through some shade and we could throw shade back. But what happens when these white folks become Muslim is a different story. My hat goes off to them because their families and their people kick them out. That's how they lose white privilege. They can become Buddhist, Hindu, anything else, and it's all diversity, and they get to keep some of the privilege. They're just strange. But when they become Muslim, they lose that privilege. It's over. And that's why a lot of them are under pressure. And they do face violence and vandalism for this. I mean, they become the niggas of their people. And that's what happened to this fellow. So I actually, to the tribe that took me in, I actually had to sit up and say to them, I understand he's odd. I understand he's been a little bit mean to y'all. He doesn't hate y'all. And one of them even said, hey, yo, Black, you think he's racist maybe? And I said, no, absolutely. That's not the case. He's more racist against his own race at this point. No, y'all cool with him racially speaking. He doesn't fully understand racism yet, but now he's going through it. He's going through racism now because the hate that they have for Black folk is also the hate they got for Muslims. He doesn't hate y'all for race. No, that's not the case. He would hate me more if that was the case. What is happening is that he's traumatized because when he became Muslim, his people became racist against him and his own brothers fist fought him. He only has his mother now. Only. And he can't find his father to seek refuge with his dad either. Yeah. See, I was in touch with my father almost daily, definitely weekly during this time. And I'm the Black American. And he was the white Canadian who could not even locate his father. He never found out anything about his father again till about a year and a half later when his father was found deceased. And I found out the day that he came to me and apologized for the way that he had been acting with not just me or their tribe, but with a lot of people. He wouldn't apologize to them. He apologized to me. So he made good on it eventually. He really did a 180-degree turn. We got transferred to this town where I now am. Both of us did, actually. He got married and had a baby. And then he passed away in 2018 during Ramadan. So even he took the medicine that is in Islam and he used it in stages, and it was delayed, but he used it to heal. He used it to heal himself step by step. He went to those who knew the religion. However, I will also say this. They were more sympathetic. That's the truth. They were more sympathetic to him as a white Muslim whose parents had kicked him out. Well, not his parents, but his brothers had fought him, and his mother was the only one that had anything to do with him. So when they helped him out with his manners a little bit and told him, look, man, you've been through some trauma, you've been through some stuff, but nobody here is your enemy. You're here in the Gulf now. You will not face discrimination for being a Muslim. That's not going to happen. And if anybody did do it, the rest of us are going to get on them. You straight, you fine. It's okay. You're home now. And when he calmed down, he went and he took the next step and he made the apologies and made amends. And he tied the knot, married, started a family, and then during Ramadan, he had a car accident. Yeah, telling Stuart, I know your experiences are different. I'm aware because I remember you telling me beforehand. And yours, your story broke my heart. Yeah, it broke it busted me up a little bit. I don't think I had nightmares about it, but I fully remember the stress of just imagining your scenario. That was stressful just to imagine it. I didn't have nightmares, but I remember being awake when I was supposed to be asleep and losing sleep behind it. So what I'm saying is that if this Caucasian Canadian could do this, we can also do that. And right now, many of us might be thinking that, I'm not so sure because even the ones that really know the religion and they helped them out, they wouldn't be as sympathetic with us because they're always telling us, they sound like white folks, they tell us to get over it and don't relive it and stuff like that. Well, it's not because they think it's nothing. It's not because they think it's okay what happened. It's because they don't know the full extent of it. They're trying to, sometimes they compare the slavery they had with the slavery that the Americans had. And see, here, people in captivity were not systemically abused because there were rules against that. And as a matter of fact, too much abuse and a captive might be freed by the courts. That could happen here. And you didn't want to buy someone and then lose your money all of a sudden. It was better to just free them of your own free will, but you didn't want to abuse them to the point that they were then emancipated from you because you were an up human being. You didn't want that. So They're thinking about their own issue of bondage, which has been phased out. They don't fully understand what ours was like and then what happened afterwards. So they really don't know. But there are now clerics, Muslim shuyukh and imams that actually do kind of work with youth. They do, and yeah, they're African or African American. Shadeed Muhammad is one of them. I'll type his name in the chat. He'll tell you they don't care about what you went through. It's not that they don't really care, but they don't even know and fully understand. And if they had an idea, they would tell you they don't understand. So they can't help you fix our issues. But the religion has the medicine. It's just they don't understand the application of it. He'll explain it. He's got a channel. You can check it out. He deals with family formation and cohesion amongst us because that's been jacked up. A little bit blue pill, but he doesn't believe in taking no crap off anybody. So he's not like a blue pill simp. He just doesn't fully understand the red pill stuff we understand. But he does understand family formation and cohesion and how it's been messed up amongst us. He does. And he doesn't give the women the pass for the effery and then hold the men's feet to the fire. That's just one example. There's another one. I've given his name before. He's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Naeem Abdullah. He also has a YouTube channel. And he's got, I think, a Facebook page too. Probably Twitter. I don't know. I don't have Twitter. But that's another one here. And if you really have heard, if you really wrapped up in this whole anti-black narrative that has been associated with Islam just to be aimed at us so that we would miss the medicine, I'll tell you someone that has information on how we've been misinformed. And that includes the information that we wrongly got from Chancellor Williams, a man named Rudolph Bilal Ware. Rudolph Bilal Ware also has this information. And the stuff that's in Chancellor Williams' book, where the Arabs are depicted as no more than white folks, and that's really where a lot of the stuff got started. That Chancellor Williams' book was cross-referenced by Rudolph Bilal. In other words, he looked into the sources that Chancellor Williams used to write that book, and he found that they weren't accurate. And not only that, but these records pretty much were only kept by, not only were these records pretty much kept by European colonizers, but one specific one, France. Now, we see what's going on in France right now with the Muslims. Do you think that France has ever had a motive to tell the truth about Islam or Arab involvement in West Africa? I mean, knowing what we know now and how they used to decapitate Algerians that fought back, they didn't just shoot them in battle, they would decapitate them and terrorize Algerian people. And they used rape as well, systemically. Do you think that they ever had a motive to just tell the truth about Islam and black folks? France is still upset that the Haitian Revolution was successful. And guess who started that? Why do you think his name was Dirty Boukman? Dirty Boukman was called Boukman. He was called that because it was a corruption of Boukman, because he was literate in Arabic. He was literate in Arabic. He was the one that started that off. The Voodoos, the Voodooians and the Voodoo practitioners came along later on. They try to say that that revolt was started with Voodoo. Come on now. That was later. It wasn't started with Voodoo. They themselves said that Boukman, and I think another one was Makandal as well. Okay, yeah, Tahir Wyatt, that's right. Because Shadeed Muhammad actually mentioned Tahir Wyatt, and I forgot about him. Sorry about that. It's true. Yeah, Abdullah bin Bobby, I haven't read his last book. But if he is holding men's feet to the fire, and he's giving the ladies a pass when they're doing wrong, then I'm going to retract what I said. I can't say that I have read the book. I don't think I could even get a copy of it here. But if I find out that that's what he's doing, then I'm gonna retract what I said. He'll deal with black issues, but in terms of family formation and cohesion, then we'll have to dismiss him. Because I'm not here to sit up, I'm not here to tell women to take crap off of men, but I'm also not here to tell men to take crap off women, Muslim or not. There's no reason that we should be oppressing each other. It's just that usually when the men oppress the women, someone's got something bad to say about them. We don't get away with that too easily. At least not verbally, we don't. Whereas, of course, we're so conditioned to accept certain terms that we don't even think of them as being oppressive. That's really why I got the stance that I got. But I'm gonna tell y'all, that's another thing too. Def Rocker pointed this out. Shadid used to be a hardcore Salafi until he woke up. And see, for those of you that aren't Muslim and you're wondering about it, that's it's like a methodology. It's not a different religion altogether, but it's a methodology that has largely been supported by, mostly it's been supported by Saudi Arabia. Not even the other Gulf states have supported it as much as Saudi Arabia has. And it's one of the it's one of the strictest methodologies and interpretations there is. Many of them believe, like they see the religion through a very Bedouin set of eyes. So to them, the women must wear the face veil. It's not an option. They have to do it. I don't know what the proof is, but I've seen evidence of it not being required, but still good. That's the evidence I saw. I'm not giving the fatwa. I'm simply saying that in their case, their belief is the face veil is the requirement for women, and that pretty much if there are different opinions from different scholars on a particular subject, they just go with the strictest one. Now, I've taught people from Saudi Arabia. They're not too far from here, so we get students from there. They may be living with their relatives on this side of the border. So we get some of them as students. They do the most cheating. They are the most Bedouin. And I'll put it to you like this. If you have mouthwash with alcohol in it, they're the ones you might have to worry about drinking it. It's not the other Gulf Arabs that you got to worry about doing stuff like that, drinking mouthwash just to get some alcohol. No, and by the way, that alcohol is toxic to ingest. That's the thing that a lot of us may not understand, and they don't understand, generally speaking. But in Saudi, their mouthwash, they can't sell mouthwash with alcohol in it, because even though you're going to spit it out and you can't ingest it safely anyway, they have to worry there about their people doing that. Now, once you leave and go into any other Gulf nation, you can get mouthwash with alcohol in it because nobody's going to drink it. It's just there to disinfect the germs and disinfect the mouth. You spit it out, you rinse it out with water, it's gone. But what I'm saying is that that's the mindset that Saudis in general have. And so they're, up until recently, the government pretty much supported that particular mindset being preached abroad. And Shadid was of that mindset. And that's what, in a lot of the poorest African-American neighborhoods, that is the particular methodology of the majority of the Muslims. It is, it's like the right-wing Republican version, so to speak, for black people. Now, the ironic thing is that an African-American Salafi is vastly different from a Gulf Salafi or any Arab Salafi for the most part. But anyway, that's a different topic. I'm just simply saying that to say that Shadid Muhammad, while still understanding methodologies and studies in Islam, he pretty much looked and said, well, that's not going to work for black folk. You can't take, because he studied specifically in Saudi Arabia. And he pretty much said, you can't take a specifically Saudi view and apply it to African Americans. It just won't work. But that's exactly what happened. So we got caught up in arguments that we should not have been caught up in. And he pretty much said, look, we missed the substance for the style. And so that's where he comes about. Now, Abdullah bin Babi Atayib has pointed something out, and that is that, wait, I'm sorry, I meant to put this one. This is the one I meant to put up. And this one here, that says something right there. Because this is something that I've seen imams have to deal with a lot in the Muslim community of African Americans, a lot. They've had to, when I was living in Atlanta, an imam had to get up on Friday and he had to say, sisters, we are talking about our responsibilities to you a lot of times. But you all have this preference that doesn't sound like a Muslim woman's preference for the most part. He said, there are a lot of you that want a particular kind of man. And even though he's Muslim, he's got a gun under his seat that's probably got some bodies on it. And if he was born Muslim, he doesn't act like it. And that's what you're looking for. You're still looking for a thug with tawheed. And for the non-Muslims in here, tawheed just means an understanding of the oneness of God and no association of partners or depictions of him as any idols or images. That's what that word means. He was pretty much saying you're looking for a Muslim gangster or a gangster turned Muslim that's still a gangster. Like, that's what y'all looking for. And he called them out. Now this, I'm gonna tell y'all when I remember hearing this. I remember hearing this about 2004 or 5. So that's how long ago it was. Y'all know what year it is now. And he was talking about this. When I went home and told my wife at the time, the American, she rolled her eyes and said, oh my God, why y'all gotta talk about women so much? Something of that nature. And she said, I know that there are women that like that kind of thing, but I mean, how rare are they? Are they really that common? I told her, I don't know. At that point, I'd been Muslim for about 3 years. So I told her, hey, I got to take their word for it. Y'all know. What do I know? But I came to understand that apparently this was a thing. Over time, I came to realize this. And so later on, fast forward to recently, and hell, my second to last upload, I think, was about that, or was it a live stream? I can't remember. My memory's not that strong, but I did talk about the feminism and the misandric feminism amongst the FMM, and that is a feminist misandric Muslima. I basically had to point that out and say that they're coming in with feminism and they're coming in with the hybristophilia, and they're still coming in with the hypergamy. Now, they done already combined feminism with hypergamy. Throw in misandry with that and hybristophilia, and what you got is a woman that's a great friend and a great cousin and a great sister for the most part, puts her forehead to the ground 5 times a day probably. But then when it comes to the men she's going to choose for herself, she can't do it. He's got to be perfect. He's got to be a thug on the street and a baller in the boardroom. I mean, he's pretty much got to have on a suit, either a suit underneath some baggy street clothes or baggy street clothes underneath the suit, either one, and be able to twirl around and go back and forth between the two of them like Superman or Wonder Woman. Yeah. That's pretty much what happened. Walaikum salam, Mr. Gurey. And so, and you know what, telling Stewart, yeah, it may happen like that. It may be that you have to. That's a possibility, but you see, if you're choosing better, telling Stewart, if you're already choosing better, then your response really is you're barking up the wrong tree. That's really the response. I mean, when you say that's why I've been celibate, that would imply that there are no good dudes. And that's not necessarily the case. Women still have more options in men than men have in women. And I'm sure you have more options than many men of a similar situation and a similar age to you, even then. But it is true, though. I mean, there is a price that comes with choosing better. And there are a lot of ladies that look especially a lot of younger ladies, my age and younger, that say, absolutely not, I'm not going to choose better if it comes down to that. That's what's happening. A lot of the younger women in our age group and younger, and even younger than us, telling Stewart, what they're pretty much saying is, well, I mean, I'm not going to sleep with most men I see, but I'm going to still have a high body count. I don't need to choose better. The men just need to be better. That's what a lot of them are saying. But then when you tell them they need to be better, because I tell men we need to choose better too. I say that to men, but we're conditioned and trained largely by older men and women to not choose better because, again, we're trained to think we're not the prize and that women don't even really have an interest in men like that. When in fact, really, women don't have an interest in the majority of men they see, but they got a strong, overwhelming interest in a few men that they're willing to share with each other, knowingly or unknowingly. And so that's part of why it is that I've said that when we take Islam, we got to take it lock, stock, and barrel. That means polygyny needs to be legalized. It actually needs to be the norm. And it needs to be the norm for men that are middle class, not just the wealthy men. Normal class men should be married to two, especially in the culture that you all are living in right now, because as I've said, you do not and you cannot beat women with your hands. You beat them with other wives. And unfortunately, telling Stuart what's happening now is, I mean, we are in a shifting culture, but you see, I'll tell you straight away that the men my age and younger and older, they're a mix. There are the abusers. They're the ones and they're not the majority, but they do exist. We don't lie about that. There are the ones that are not abusive, but they just don't excite women because they're ignorant about women. And that's the majority. We just don't know what women want. And then there's a minority that knows what women want, and all the women want them. And they're not even all cheaters, but they're the ones that have the opportunity to be cheaters. So since, of course, a cheater is always more available to other women than a monogamous man is, or a faithful man, even a faithful polygynous man is not as available as an adulterous cheater. What happens is that, of course, the women have they can find the cheaters, but they can't find exactly what they want. We admit that the men are a mix. What's happening, though, telling Stuart, is that for my age group, because I think you said you're older than I am, for my age group, man, and younger, it's not much of a mix. The mix is there, but it's not really that much of a mix. It's pretty much various women with various personalities. They have different favorite flowers, different taste in food, different things like this. They still have the same taste in men. And it's pretty much just the same ones that they want, the same few men they want. When it comes to men, they are the same. They're willing to use most men, and they're only willing to make it worth the time or be worth the time of a few men. And that's what it is. And they're not being honest about it. And that's why it is that a lot of men are saying, yeah, well, as unnatural as celibacy is, you got a lot of celibate men too. And they're not near your age or mine. There are a lot of young celibate men. Incel of also, there are a lot of them that simply say, we can't settle for what's out there because it's too bad. And yeah, we can't settle for what's out there because that's just too bad. So what we're just going to have to do is we're just going to have to stay by ourselves. It's unnatural. Eventually, young men are going to start buying these robots when they become affordable. I'm not looking forward to that. I don't want that. It's just that that's the option that's out there. See, with women, there's still options in men. It's just that they only want the options that every other woman wants. With men, there aren't these same options even to begin with. In the West, if she is moderately attractive, she's got an attitude problem out of this world when it comes to men. And she may be a great friend to have. She may be a considerate friend when she friend zones you. That's a possibility, but it's always the friend zone. And she still does not want you. It's like she doesn't even want you to get with someone else. She only wants her ugly friends to find someone as good as you. That's what it's like for us telling Stuart. That's what the deal is. And you know what, Mr. Gure? That's right. When they hear the word polygamy, they get combative, but they won't let go of their hypergamy, and they insist on holding on to the feminism. And those right there are two mutually exclusive things. They can't go together. It's just not possible. And if a man had the resources and was willing to let her indulge in those two at the expense of his resources, she would eventually lose respect. And that's one thing I have to say about my dad. Both of my parents are still alive, thank goodness. Alhamdulillah. I ask him to preserve my parents and to guide them before their time is up. So y'all make that dua for me, please. That he guide my parents, my brother, and my son. But when they see, the thing about my dad is that fortunately he was that guy that says, I'm gonna take care of the family. You keep the money that you earn, put it aside for a rainy day in case something happens to me. I'll take the responsibility. And he could afford to do it when I was coming up, and I thank Allah for that too. But one of the things he made very clear to my mother was, I'm not going to abuse you and I'm not going to cheat on you, but I ain't going to take no shit off you either. He made this quite clear. My own mother told me that one of the things that attracted her to my dad was that he could be a nice guy and an asshole, whichever one was necessary at the time. But then again, my mother was also balanced. She wasn't looking for any man to be chest thumping and putting on displays to scare other men. There's a level of violence she was not looking for in a man either. So the fact that she could notice the balance in my father when she found him to be balanced also says a lot about her. What we're dealing with in our generation is exactly not that. If you are balanced, you ain't no punk and you ain't starting no problems either. The hybristophilic Western woman is looking at you like you a punk because she can't see a balance. So you're not starting anything and scaring other dudes. You must be the one that's scared. That's what she sees in her mind. She can't see a balance. So you scared. She wants someone that scares you and others. That's the hybristophiliac in her. And then, of course, the hypergamous instinct tells her that you got to do, be, and have more than her. But then the feminist tells her that even if you do, you ain't as good as her because she's a woman. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's why when I say, yeah, we need Islam as a solution, but we need to take it lock, stock, and barrel. What that means is that we have to be willing to take on our responsibilities and assert our rights as husbands. There's that balance. And they got to be willing to take on their responsibilities and assert their rights as wives. And there again is the balance. And when you find that you're being balanced, or at least you're trying, and they refuse, then you're going to have to take spouses from elsewhere, which is what a lot of you are going to have to do. But that also means that when she finds that she is, when she sees that there's an abundance of men, that I'm not talking about their poverty, but she sees an abundance of men that will not take the responsibility. I didn't say satisfy her materialism, but they won't even take the responsibility. They won't be the one that does the work to earn the bread for the family and then support according to their means now, to be fair. They have a right to say, I'm not dealing with this dude. They had that right. But see, most of us would look and say, yeah, they got a right to leave when he's not even trying. Most of us will say she got a right to leave, but she just can't deal with the amount that he's able to bring home. But she can't blame him for what he didn't get. Most of us would say that. So let's see here. Def Rocker said, Nkuwat Abu Muslima used to be hard Salafi, but had to tone down his rhetoric. Other Salafis started to get on him for thinking autonomously. And that does happen, man. That really does. It's sad, but they really do. And truth be told, there are a lot of Salafi women now that are against polygyny. They'll fight you on it. And they'll demand a 50K dowry. And one of the things that they do is that they're upping these dowries to decrease the chances that a man can afford to be polygynous. And I'm gonna tell you what they do even here in the Gulf, because I don't want to give you all this idea that it's a dream over here either. It's not. I'm gonna tell you what they do in the Gulf. They're generally respectful of their husbands. They don't tend to disrespect their men, but they play a hell of a lot of games here too. And I'm gonna tell y'all what it is. What they do here is they will, of course, they got high dowries. And even if the woman doesn't demand it, usually the family steps in and does. So she may never have a chance to tell the man, look, I only want 10 grand, but family's trying to raise it. No, she won't even have a chance to tell him. Dad walks in, family honor, 50,000. Actually, it's more like 150 here. And there are a lot of young guys that say, I'm not getting married. It's just not going to happen. It's too expensive. You start your life off in debt and the economy is already up fuck. We can't do that. So if I have to spend that much to get married, why should I have to give her a baby? And I say to them, this needs to be a condition. I mean, you men need to start acting like a block. Y'all talk to each other all the time. Y'all need to start saying, look, if you want this kind of dowry, you can have it, but here's a condition for it. We ain't having no kids. We get married and I'll treat you, but we ain't having no kids. Why would we? They're expensive. You want me to start my life off in debt? What I need to give you kids for? Waive your rights to children if you want a dowry like that. You want a dowry like that? We're never going to own a house. We're going to rent an apartment and a 2-bedroom at that, because I'm going to be in debt, paying it off for decades. That's what the hell this means. See, what these ladies do is they have these high dowries, or the families do. Whatever the case is, it's expensive. So then after marriage, they forget all about the dowry that the husband already had to spend going in debt to do it, because you got to borrow that kind of money. They forget all about that. And what they do is they keep on bothering the husband so they can shop. Give me a few reals so I can go shopping. My friends and I, we're going to the mall. I want to get some coffee. That's all. They're nickel and dime the husbands all the time, but they're doing it not even because they really want to buy all these things. They're doing it so that they can spend the money so that he can't save it, so that he can be able to afford to marry another wife. And most of these women have friends that they can't find a husband. They don't feel a guck. They don't want their husband marrying their friends. They would rather see their friend commit adultery with somebody. Well, it's fornication in English, but they'd rather see their friends fornicate with someone than to say to her, look, let's just call it what it is. You got a husband, you got 3 slots. He has 3 slots left. Why don't we share them? That's the game they play here. The other game they play here is, and they'll talk to their mothers. Their mothers will tell them this. Their mothers will say to them, shop and spend that money. Don't let them save. Secondly, conceive early on so you can tie him to you. I kid you not, these mothers say this. Now that sounds like something that a mother in the projects might say when she's trifling to her daughter. No, there ain't no projects here. Everybody ain't rich, but ain't no projects here like that. But this is what mothers who came from stable 2-parent homes themselves and are married will tell their daughters. It's the same game for the most part. And I want y'all to understand that. And they're in on it with each other. And that's what separates them from us. We don't discuss how to avoid these things, but they're sitting up and they're discussing how to coordinate it so that the men don't have any options. I kid you not. When they get together and have coffee, that's their discussion. When the men get together and have coffee and socialize, they may be talking a little bit about business and a little bit about family, but they're not talking about what do we need to do to make it easier on these young men here that ain't married, because these ladies playing games. They just accept the materialism and the hypergamy. They don't accept the feminism, but they're finding that they may have to accept that too, because the ladies are coordinating with each other. The men ain't. And that's the mistake. That's what's wrong. The project mindset, yep. And you find it here where there ain't no projects. And that's exactly what we're looking at, that project mindset. And see, what's up, Brother Taylor? Unfortunately, I mean, it's cool that there is a dowry and they do have the right to ask for what they want. That's true. But the problem is that they demand that right while they want to deny the rights of husbands. And polygyny is one of the rights of the husband. Provided he can afford it and treat them equally, that's one of the rights. So my issue is their insistence upon their own rights and their insistence on taking the rights of the men or removing the rights of the men. That's why I've got the issue. You're right, Jaws. Tunisia outlawed it completely. And those men said that those ladies play games. I was talking with one Tunisian brother on the rooftop of the teacher's residence building earlier. And he told me about that. And he said not only that, but that you got two types of marriage. One is the kind of marriage you go into where if you do split, they take your shit, take half of it. And the other one is pre-agreed upon, of course, but that's where if they split, actually, the first type is where if you request a divorce, they take half your stuff. And I think they get alimony too. The other one is where if you request a divorce, they don't. Now, in either case, if they request a divorce, they're not entitled to half your stuff. He said they never agree to the second kind. And that actually is the end of most engagements. That it is just known there that if you want to break the engagement with her, you ask her to agree to the type where if you request it, she don't get half your stuff. And if you don't ask her and you go with the default marriage, which is where you request a divorce and she gets half your stuff, she now knows that she's got you by the wallet, literally. So she just changes her attitude, lets herself go, develops a contempt for you, and you don't ask for the divorce because that means she's gonna get half your stuff and alimony. And he said that's the game. They would never want you to be married without financial stress, not just responsibility, but specifically stress. That's what he told me. And in Morocco, yeah, the first wife's got to agree. And you know what else they do in Morocco, Jaws? I kid you not. The law is that the first wife's got to agree and you got to be able to afford it and all that. That's the law. Guess what? They got special judges. By law, there's special polygamy judges that deal with this. Those judges don't exist. So you have to see a judge that doesn't exist even to pull it off. So Morocco's actually made it illegal. On the books, it's not illegal, but in practice, it's actually impossible. I know because I was at one of the courthouses trying to find one of those judges, and they never existed. And everybody had different directions to give. Go to the third floor, far corner. Go to the second floor. You go up there, they say, no, it's on the second floor. What's his name? Nobody knew his name. And lawyers finally broke it down for me and said, the government would rather you commit fornication than for you to marry more than one because France is pressuring the king. That's what they said. That's what they told me. And truth be told, A. LaRue, the Western ones don't understand, but even a lot of the Eastern men don't understand. It's just that it's not really talked about. However, there's a certain amount of crap that they don't expect to have to tolerate, but that's also changing. So the understanding of ladies is not increasing, but the amount of crap that men got to tolerate is increasing. So it's actually getting worse even outside the West. That's what's sad about it, A. LaRue. And telling Stuart, you're right, it's not obligatory. I don't do it, and I'm not wrong for not doing it. But it is still necessary as a legality in order to curb a lot of the effery that young men are facing. Because we have to be honest, we don't know as much about your gender as you all know about us. We're too easy. We're too simple. These games that these wives are playing in the country in which I'm living, really in the whole region, all the Gulf nations have this particular thing. That's what they told me. These are not games that the husbands are playing. These are games that the ladies are playing. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to, again, what I'm getting at is that they're trying to get their rights without giving the rights of the husband. That's what I'm getting at. They're trying to make expensive dowries mandatory, which they've already succeeded in doing because even fathers will go along with that. But then they want to turn around and make polygamy impossible, if not illegal, just an impossible thing to pull off. And that's one of the reasons they try to make these expensive dowries. It's not just family honor. It's also because they want marriage to be unaffordable to men. They want marriage to be difficult. And when some of these women can't find a husband, I don't know exactly what they're doing, to get their rocks off. I'm really not sure. But I understand he was monogamous. Then again, she was Khadijah. There are no Muhammads today, and there is also no Khadijah today. And I mean, later on, he did. Now we have to look at what he did later in his life as a priority over what he did in the beginning. Or we have to look at the difference in the situations in order to come up with a ruling or even just a norm. Now, Khadijah was the one that had the money. But by the same token, he was married to her for 15 years before he even received any kind of revelation. So, I get it. You're not going to be for polygamy, and that's fine. But you have to look at what you do want. Now, you yourself may not have been very difficult on the men that you married, but that would make you actually a rarity. And in truth be told, even if you're the type of wife for which your husband would not need another wife, even if you were that type, it doesn't mean that that's what's going on for the most part. So if you are the exception, that's great, that's fine, but you're the exception. I didn't live with that exception until I left the US. Ever. I didn't live with that exception till I left. Didn't find one. And I could tell you this, when I was in the West telling Stuart, and I was married to an American, and she knew I couldn't afford a second one and legally could not have married a second one, she milked that. She wasn't even mean and loud and nasty, but she just very passively, aggressively milked and abused that. So I know firsthand about it. And I look back now, and to be honest with you, I regret that I didn't cheat. I didn't need to cheat, but I regret that I didn't. I look back and I say, actually, what I should have done was married a second one and made her think I was cheating. That's how bad it was. And there were other guys going through a hell of a lot worse. So, I get it. Triangulations, yes, a bad wife can turn around and go anywhere. But the funny thing is that as much as women say that men are the ones that are horn dogs and can't control it, all of a sudden, when you start mentioning polygyny, even just two wives, one wife can't conceive of another wife being faithful to the husband and not bringing home a disease. That's the funny thing about it. It's we men that are always thought of as being any kind of sexual deviant and pervert because we've got no self-control. But then all of a sudden, they can't trust another woman to not go out and catch a disease and bring it home to the husband and give it to her by extension. This is what I've heard about a lot. It's like, okay, so it's always the men that are cheating, but even non-cheating faithful wives can't expect other women to be faithful. I mean, fit the guck out of here. That's hilarious when I think about it. And I've heard hardcore Sullivan women saying this. I'm out if he marries again because what if she cheats, brings home a disease? Yep. How likely is that to happen? I mean, the fact that they think that this is so likely, that tells me something. I should have thought about this earlier, and I should have put this in a previous recording. But you know what? It is an option. To leave, that is an option. I don't know what the penalty is if a wife decides to leave because of that. But they can certainly request a divorce, I'm sure, and go before the court or ask him for it and he gives it to her. And that's the funny thing, Greg and Greg. Is it love or is it jealousy? Because we know that they can get jealous without even being in love with the man. And my question is, what are they jealous about? But that's another topic for another time. So back to the original topic, Islam is the solution. But if you've got questions about it, you got concerns, you really want to know, like, how do I ensure that I'm not going to run across some anti-blackness that's encoded in the religion that's going to make me leave the religion? We can answer that if anybody has questions. But I'm gonna tell y'all straight away that in these, super black to Africa, pro-black circles that also bash Islam and use Arab misbehavior as an excuse, I'm going to tell y'all that that's definitely not the case. They are coming with something that, for all of their pro-black talk, and I was of that. I used to think the way they did, because I really didn't know that it wasn't in there. I couldn't conceive of the Arabs subscribing to a religion that made them equal to black folks. I couldn't conceive anybody doing it. I really thought that everybody that's not us hates us. That's what I thought. I really thought that. I was convinced of that. But now what we're coming to find out is that a lot of this is traced back to Chancellor Williams. And Chancellor Williams used French colonial records. And these French colonial records were dubious themselves. And there were other records that went against what he was saying or what he got from the French colonial records. And it wasn't even only the French that told these lies, to be honest, or lied about things. The British used to say this. They used to say certain things, but it turned out that you could ask Abdullah Hakim Quick about this. I'm going to put his name in the chat too, Abdullah Hakim Quick. And he gave a talk called Islam, Slavery, and the African. And in that one, he refers to taking a tour. I think it was in Tanzania or in Zanzibar. He took a tour, and the guy was talking. Apparently, the guy was an Omani Zanzibar, and he was talking about this storehouse that was used to hold the slaves before they would be shipped off to the Middle East. And he went and did some digging and found out that, according to British records themselves, this was a British-built munitions storehouse. So even the British records were different from what was being said. And he even said that there's a propaganda. Now, this was back before 2000. He said this, that he gave this talk. And he even said that there is a propaganda that is designed to divorce black liberation from Islam. Even he mentioned this. And that's what I wanted to bring to light here. Now, there's another group. Let's see, there's one man you can find on, I don't know if he's on YouTube, but he's definitely on Facebook. His name is Hakeem Muhammad, and he also is one of those that runs something called the Black Dawah Network. And I put those in the chat too. You can find information there. The Black Dawah Network actually has historical information given in cartoon form, in comic book form. Or I should just say illustrated graphic novel form, because it's not childish at all. You know what, Charles Irby, I don't know how true it is. It would depend on, I don't know what the percentages and the stats are. I don't think there's been a study on it. So I avoid saying this as a blanket statement to answer your question. I avoid giving a blanket answer without stats because I want to be fair. But I do want to say that Black American, well, actually Western convert women above a certain age, right? Actually, you know what? Western convert women who converted when they were adults usually did have at least a sexual partner. The question is going to be how many they had. Now, if you are a virgin yourself, I will say that there's a way to avoid that, because if the man is a virgin and he's talking to any Western convert sister that converted as an adult, if he says that he's a virgin, chances are she's going to go ahead and call it off anyway. All he has to do is be innocent, naive, and inexperienced, and let it show. And chances are she's going to call it off, because that's just the nature. But as far as how many of them are like that, I don't know. What I do know is that you got to be careful. You have to be careful if they were born to Muslim parents, but they were raised in the West. You got to be careful even then. In the UK, you got to be careful. And in Canada, you got to be careful. A survey was done in Canada. And in Canada, what they found, Charles Irving, was that 60% of the women in the survey, in the sample, I don't know how many it was, but 60% in that sample said that they had slept with someone before they got married. I don't remember what the numbers were for the men because it was so low. The percentage was so low that they didn't even bother to report it. They said it was something insignificant. But for the women, it was 60% of Muslim women in Canada. They didn't even specify where they were born or grew up. They just said 60% of Muslim women in Canada in the sample survey admitted that they had slept with someone before marriage, fornicating. So that's why I would say to you, just go ahead and be careful anyway, because it's not okay for me to blame the innocent woman, of course. I just want you to understand that the chances are very slim of finding them. Even if they're the majority, the chances are very slim of you locating them. I don't know what the reason is, but it seems to me like most of us normal men are simply not going to find women that have as little experience as we do or less. They're just not. We're just not that lucky. So, yeah, good afternoon, good day. I hope so, man. And if I was able to help you out and just, oh, you made that dua actually. Thank you so much for making that dua for guidance for my family. I really do appreciate that. I do hope that it helped out, because that's my goal. Okay, so Black Dawah Network is on IG. Excellent. Thanks for that information. And yes, Islam and the introduction to West Africa, that's one of the talks that I saw too, the first one, Charles Irving. That was it. Yeah. And Jaws, that's exactly what I wanted to know about. If we ain't sleeping around, now there are a few Muslim men that might be sleeping around, but see this one here, this one here. I got to put this on the screen. If we're not the ones that are doing this in large numbers, and we know it's very few of us, there are those of us that do, but if it ain't us, if it ain't the majority of us, if it's very abnormal for us to do it and less normal for us than for non-Muslim men, you got the right. That's the right point. That means that. What that means is that they've actually developed a contempt for the Muslim man and a respect for the non-Muslim man. They developed a respect for the same kind of Muslim man that a lot of the non-Muslim women all are willing to sleep with and share with each other in the bed. That's what that means, because they know this is wrong and they know that they're bringing to you an inferior product, so to speak, if you want to call them a product. They know that they're bringing inferior quality to you if they've slept around with these dudes and then they want to come to you for marriage. And still they got these high dowries, as if they're not bringing the memories and DNA of other men into the bed. This is true. That's a very true thing to worry about. It is not okay. And I wanted to tell you this, Jaws, I was in another city visiting a former colleague that used to work for the same company. And he and I were walking through the mall talking, and he was saying that he had lost any interest in getting married because what he had learned. Now, he's from the UK. And he said that he had lost any interest in getting married because he had learned about how few British Muslim wives were actually virgins at the time of their marriages. He said that they had developed an attitude, and Gragan Gure, you just said it here, right there. They call you an incel for not doing zina. What he said, what this British Muslim brother told me, was that it was the sisters that had developed this. They had developed a lack of respect for Muslim men because Muslim men were not having sex before marriage. So they didn't want the Muslim guy that had grown up Muslim, had not fornicated, and was now ready to marry because he was sexually inexperienced, and they just couldn't respect him. He said they had an attitude that pretty much was making them say to these men, okay, so you really want to stick it in, don't you? Well, you know what? You're never going to get it. Because those are the only men they can say this to. They don't want to say to the non-Muslim men, you'll never get this. So they get this power trip off of saying this to the Muslim men, and they're running the Muslim men off. That's exactly what he said to me. Now, this is in the city in which I visited. Another former colleague of mine has said the same. He said something similar, actually. What he said was that his friends and sister knew that most of the ladies that they knew who got married had slept with someone beforehand. That's what another Muslim colleague of mine said from the UK. I got two Muslim cats from the UK that said the same thing. That the Muslim women from the UK had developed an attitude that was actually against the chastity of Muslim men that wanted to marry them. And they couldn't respect them because they had experience with penis that these men did not have with vagina. And they weren't looking and saying, well, I'm the one that fornicated and he didn't, he's innocent. They were looking and saying, he's naive and I'll wrap him around my finger, run circles around him. I can't respect him. Yeah. Right there. How dare they have all these standards when they're presenting themselves having slept with two or more non-Muslim men, two Muslim guys that have never slept around. How dare they have these standards? I know it sounds like I'm just browbeating on women. It comes across like that. But see, we already get on men about these things. If we know a Muslim dude is fornicating, now we may not know about someone that's doing this, but if we know that a Muslim is fornicating, we don't sit up and say to them, you deserve the best woman that's out there. That's the difference. If we see that a Muslim dude is fornicating, we'll tell them, yeah, you don't want to do that. And if they have to deal with the consequences of that later, we'll say, yeah, but look what you were doing before. If your homeboy is fornicating, then he gets married, and then years later, he finds out his daughter fornicated, you're not going to say, oh, man, you don't deserve that. You're going to say, damn, bruh, didn't we tell you katudin tudan? That as you practice, so it will be practiced against you. Didn't we tell you to stop this when you were young in that age? That's why Allah gave you daughters, because you wouldn't have cared if it was your son anyway. That's how we talk to the men. So if we don't know that the man's doing it, we might even not ask. But if we know the man's doing it, even if we hide the sin from other people, we're going to say to that man, yeah, but you still did that mess though, unless we don't know he's doing it. You see, that's exactly why it is that I've been saying what I've been saying about Islam being a solution. But what it means is that in order to keep the family together, the men and the women are going to have the proper attitude. And I can say I've seen Muslim men that have all kinds of attitudes, good and bad, and they seem to be fairly evenly distributed, to be honest. So in other words, we're a mix. I can't sit up and say that I'm saying this, not with Muslim women, but with Muslim women in the West. I can't say I've seen the same thing. With the sisters in the East, what I've seen is they're willing to not sleep around, and they're willing to get married and pretty much listen to the husband, but they're going to get their rights, and they're going to take away one of his rights, which is polygyny. And they're going to do that through the wallet, keeping him busy and keeping him to where he can't save and get ahead. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to let life be relaxed enough to where he could even save up enough to afford another marriage. Shuck that fit. No, I didn't curse just now. So even then, they just got to play these games, but they're not necessarily playing it to the level of disrespect as what you see in the West, although that's probably coming next. Because see, I saw a video years ago where a Kuwaiti woman, no hijab, was looking into the camera, and she was talking about what she wants, and she was saying it with attitude like a sister. Neck rolling. She didn't roll her eyes, but she was rolling her neck. And she took her hand and put up each of the fingers, and she went through all fingers when she was talking about the expensive items. She said, I want a car, I want a house, I want a maid, I want gold, and I forgot what the fifth item was. Now that was the video clip, and this was a real live action person saying this, and then it goes over into a cartoon, an animation, and the animation is a young dude. He rubs himself, if you catch my drift, and things fly, and some of it flies and hits the light switch, turns the light out, and then he just smiles and turns over, goes to sleep. So what that was pretty much saying was they're asking too much. Stay by yourself, and your hand is enough. Because that's how bad it was. Now I want you to stop and think about how bad it has to be for this type of thing to circulate from Kuwait into other Gulf areas. And I know it circulated into Saudi because it was one of the Saudi students that showed it to me. So that means it was so understood that it got even into the most conservative of Gulf nations. That's what happened. That's how bad it got. And this was 6 years ago. And the men were pretty much, at that point, there were young men that were saying, screw that. We're not playing that game. We'll stay single. And it's gotten to the point where, see, in some of these nations, it used to be that you could not, in some of these nations, when you were a man, you could not marry outside the country, I think until you got old or if you were sick. Then they'd give you permission to marry outside the country because that way a Gulf citizen woman wouldn't have to deal with you. I kid you not. Now, mind you, in these countries, you don't demonstrate out in the streets. You don't protest in the streets. You can petition governments in letters, I think, in many cases. Many people say they're scared to do that, but you do not go out in these streets and protest. That's illegal. And yet and still, these ladies did not mind petitioning their governments to lock the men into the countries when they're young, so that they could not go outside of the Gulf and get married for dowries that they could afford and not start their married lives in debt. Because when that was legal for them to do, it was easily legal without special circumstances and permissions. You know what happened? That's what they did. And Gulf women couldn't find husbands. Now what's happening is the men still aren't marrying in the kingdoms and the emirates and sultanates of the Gulf, and still not doing that as much as they would have before. So there still are many men that are saying, I'm not doing this unless my parents pay for everything. There are men saying this. There are men that will say, I'm not going to go in debt for this. I'll just stay single. Shuck that fit. And when I get too old, if I still want to get married, then I'll go outside the Gulf. Or I'll go outside the Gulf and I won't bring her into this country because then they'll say, no, y'all aren't married, but I'll go visit her in her country. Or I just simply won't get married. But what they're not going to do is trap me into this high dowry and these high debts. And then put the other social pressures on me too. Let's pop out these kids. I want this house. No, you're going to get that car, the big SUV for all of us. Because what they're telling me, when we've discussed marriage before here, what they're saying to me is there are men that are depressed, and it is not even because the women are disrespecting them. It is because it's just too damn expensive and they can't save anything. And the economies are getting bad here anyway. So it's only getting worse and it's getting more difficult. And that's what they're saying here. I'm sorry, telling Stuart. I remember you telling me that before too. That's one of your rights, though. I mean, you're not guaranteed any particular amount, but what I am saying is that that a dowry is your right. You ask for an amount that you want. It's your right to at least ask, even if nobody has it. But no dowry at all. That wasn't fair to you. That was not fair to you, Mr. Stewart. And some of the things that you've been through, I've been through as well on the male side. I don't really mention them as much, but some of the mistreatments for which you seem to have been targeted or singled out, I went through other versions, not exactly. I mean, obviously, I don't receive a dowry anyway, but some of them, before I became Muslim, I had to deal with the flip side of them. They're fairly far between. It wasn't all the time, but You know, I know, Mr. Stewart, from what you said, you're not going to be able to understand a lot of these things. I get it. All right, let's see here. Google Me says I reverted back in 2016. Once I enter a software development career, I'm going to move to East Africa to live and get married. Hope things don't go left by the time I get there. And you know what? I hope they don't too. I hope not. But in certain parts, it probably is the case. Now, I've heard that in Nairobi, it could be pretty bad sometimes. Google Me. I didn't hear about the rest of Kenya. I didn't hear anything negative about outside of there, just that in Nairobi. What I heard was not so much about the financial situation. What I heard, Google Me, was that what I heard about it was that they had taken on some of the American sisters' attitude with regards to colorism, that they had a slight gender-based colorism there, where if you are a man, you shouldn't be pale-skinned. Similar to what we have in the States and similar to what Siam Tandan Tolo was talking about in South Africa. So that's what I heard. But I didn't hear about them necessarily being, financially punitive per se. I didn't hear about that one way or another. What I do know is that if they're getting this idea from Black America, then they're going to get other ideas. That's the sad thing about it. Let's see here. Anthony Taylor, to answer your question, if a husband can't provide the big SUV or the house, they just don't, either they don't get married or she could request a divorce later because he agreed and couldn't do it, but she'd have to request it. She either has to request it from him and he gives it, or she requests it from the husband and then he doesn't, and they go to court and settle it there. She could argue in the court that he agreed to these things and didn't provide them. And then it's up to the judge. The judge could look at that at face value and say, well, you broke the promise on granting her the divorce. Or the judge could say, well, that was beyond his control. I'm not granting the divorce on those grounds. You're going to have to come with something better. I don't know what the law says at that point. I just know that that's what she could argue. If the judge is bound to give a particular ruling, I'm not aware of the binding, but it could be the case. To know if a judge is bound, Mr. Taylor, that's where you would probably have to ask a scholar or a sheikh. But I know that in the beginning, the arguments would go as I stated. Either she just doesn't marry him because he says up front, I can't do it, or he agrees and then she later on says he agreed and didn't keep that into the agreement. Unfortunately, Mr. Taylor, there are a lot of women here that they say this kind of thing is stupid. But from what I hear, most of them are above 25 because men cut them off at 25. And so it's at age 25 they start to say this is dumb. I'm not trying to put this much pressure on a man. But by that time, of course, a lot of men say, yeah, but you're 25, I'm not marrying you. Or you're above 25, I'm not marrying you. I'm not against marrying someone that's closer to my age, and I'm in my early 40s. But I'm considered rare in that regard here in this part of the world. They look to me like, yeah, that's kind of strange. Why would you be willing to? And when I tell them is, yeah, but see, the young ones are childish. Plus, I don't have to have a gang of kids like y'all want to have. And now a lot of them aren't looking for that either because the economy's changing. It's just more difficult. Let's see here. Yeah, Google Me. All right. So, yeah, you probably will be where that's concerned. As far as the money goes, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. So I'm going to take Charles Irby's word for it because it sounds like he's at least been there and I've never been there before. But at least the colorism probably wouldn't be held against you if you were in the middle. I probably wouldn't stand a chance there, to be honest with you. So I put the link to the chat I put the link to the live stream in the chat earlier, but nobody jumped in. So before I wrap this up, because I've been talking and preaching, and y'all have been very patient with me, and I appreciate that. Before I do that, is there any questions anybody wants to ask me in the chat? I give some time to ask them if anybody's got any. I give time to type. And Abdullah bin Bobby, if you're still there, man, thank you so much for sending me that image. Um, because now when people listen to the playback, they're going to learn something, inshallah. And you sent it fairly early on, so that should be an easy opportunity for them to learn. Um, so I'm giving time for anybody to type anything. And Abdullah bin Bobby, okay, Mr. Willikers Ferguson, I'm gonna give you time to type it in. What's happening, Mr. Black? I like that name, by the way, Joe Black. I'm in the Middle East teaching. Yeah, I am. I don't say which country because there's some people that are doxing, and I had some cyber vigilantes after me years ago, but I am in the Gulf. To answer your question, A. LaRue, Christian workers are generally, they're treated okay. If you're a teacher, you'll have, in some countries, it depends, you'll have some students that won't treat you right. Some of them won't. Now, it helps if you're black, to be honest with you. Believe it or not, if you're Christian, it still helps if you're black. They actually, subconsciously, they're not aware of, they actually treat white Christians a little bit more difficultly than they do black Christians. But if you don't preach Christianity to them and you're in an urban center, chances are you're pretty good. If you're if you're honest as a teacher and you mean them well, they pick up on that. And even if they don't personally want to be your friend, they'll still treat you well and respectfully. However, that is one thing. A lot of people will not be rude to you, but they will not necessarily try to get close to you either. As a Christian, they'll say, well, you're here in a professional capacity, we'll respect you. They won't necessarily bring you into their homes a lot of times. And it's not that they hate you, it's just they're going to favor the Muslims, of course. Let's see, also about what you speak in MSA, because I hear Arabs saying you won't understand everything. That's probably the case. All right, well, Mr. Willikers Ferguson, I'm not against it. I would do what I can. I'm not sure that I'm the best one for it, but I would give it my best shot. And I do think also that depending on what the questions are, I may also refer to others to help with the mentoring to make sure you get whatever expertise you might need to. And I'm not going to ask what the subject is right now in public, but I would use the subject to determine who else I might bring in. I'll let you know ahead of time if I did. But yeah, I'd give it my best shot. And I'm going to check my comments too. So if you leave a comment under any of my videos, then I will go to your channel and I will put my email address either under a video if you have it, or I would put it in, I have a way to leave it where you would see it, but somebody else wouldn't. I'd put my email address in there and then you'd be able to reach me. Let me ask you this though, Mr. Willikers Ferguson, I don't mean which city, but which country do you live in and what time zone? Tell me that much, please. It's true, Arab, Jaws, you're right about that. Arabs do say you won't understand everything, and you won't. But he would have to go into some remote Bedouin areas before they would actually weaponize a language against him. But A. LaRue is, he's telling the truth. A. LaRue is learning, he's learning some Arabic. So the best thing he would be able to do is to pretend like he knows a few words, but not like he knows exactly what he knows. And then as much as he knows, and then he would hear them talking and understand more and more. Yeah, Mr. Taylor, that's okay. I'm not terribly worried about it. Because again, where I am, a lot of times what I do is I use an internet SIM card that's I use one from one nation and I use another one from another nation. And so, because I have the internet SIM card, one under somebody else, one of them is under a citizen's ID. So they can use them internationally within the Gulf freely for they can use up a lot of data freely before they start getting hit with roaming fees anyway. So I go back and forth between two, and that's why sometimes you'll see it and sometimes you won't. But it's okay. I'll tell you more about it too, I guess, on your own channel. Okay, all right. G. Willikers Ferguson, you run the Eastern time, so that means that it's 12. It's right after midday where you are. So anyway, gentlemen, most of you all, especially those of you that are Muslim, I think you all, if you're in the Eastern time zone, you all need to be getting ready to go to the Jummah prayer anyway. Of course, it's nighttime here, so we long ago finished it. But it looks like those are all the questions that everybody's got. You're welcome, Google Me. I hope it helps. And look, y'all do me a favor. Hit the share button. I don't mind if people wait until the playback to hear it. That's fine. As long as it benefits people. If you know somebody that is kind of interested in Islam, but they can't get past the anti-blackness of some Muslims, send them this and other links and let them know that the anti-blackness is not excusable in Islam. It's not a part of it's not a part of the religion. It's just some dumb, tragically confused desert mulattoes that want to use a religion to justify their brainwashing. And let them know that, and let them understand that there is no divorcing Islam from black liberation historically. It can't be done. And that there are people who know that this is the medicine for us, and that's why they feared us taking it on, and that's why they introduced things like the Moore Science Temple and the NOI's doctrine. And then when Loon became Muslim and began to give talks in different countries, they pick him up for something that two other people conversed about without his knowledge and succeed in locking him up. And that's how they do. As a matter of fact, if I had a high profile, they would do that to me too. That's part of why I don't want a high profile. I like having this number of subscribers. That's great. When I start getting into the tens of thousands, that's when I'm gonna start getting worried. But right now, the way this is, I'm a nobody, and I like it like that. And that's why I ask you all to hit the share button. I don't want the fame. What I want is a message to go. Yeah, that's fine, G. Willikers Ferguson. That's okay. If that's why I see the comment from you, then that's why I'm gonna. That's what I'm gonna click on to go to your channel or to your account, and then message you from there, inshallah. But see, that's why I ask y'all to hit the share button. See, this is what black folks need to know. Black America, the Black Caribbean, Black Britishers, Black Canadians, Black folks in the continent even, because a lot of them have heard the same rhetoric that Islam was used to colonize Black countries, and it was forced on Black people, as if that could happen. I live in the country where they come from, one of the source countries of the Arabs. And I want to tell you all that these are not cowards. But they're just not that effective to where they can go into tropical humid climates in the first place and control things without the use of modern day technology and air conditioning. They're not even that accustomed to their own climate. You think they're going to go somewhere along close to the equator through dense tropical forest or even grasslands and fight with Black folks on the land that Black folks know that they don't know, when they themselves have a stereotypical idea that we're physically stronger than them naturally? You think they're going to do that? You think they even had it in their interest to do something like that? No. Let them know, hit the share button so people can know that in Black Africa in general, people accepted Islam because they found out about it. Same way I did. They found out what it actually was and what it wasn't, and said, oh, well, yeah, now that I know what it actually is, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And even to this day, if you really want to know something astounding, look at astronomers and what they're finding out. Every so often, astronomers and oceanographers, two different fields of study, will find or discover phenomena that were described in verses of the Quran a long time ago. That's another thing too. Now, would the devil reveal scientific phenomena? Would he do that? If the devil was going to reveal scientific phenomena to trick people, he would have done that long ago, because human beings have been around a long time. If he was going to do that, if he could do that, he would have done it from Adam and confused him and deceived him and tricked him. He wasn't going to because he couldn't. So when you start revealing scientific phenomena that's happening light years away, and you start revealing oceanic phenomena that's happening at depths we can't see without special lighting and could have never seen back then, that could only come from the Lord who's responsible for these phenomena. So hit the share button and let people know. It's not important who I am. If I revealed myself at this point, I would be doing it for the fame. I'd be doing it for vanity, and that's not a good reason to do it. What's important is the content itself. And this is the solution for not only us, but this is the solution for oppressed people in general. And that's what I want. I want to see oppressed people put this medicine on, starting with us, because everybody had to focus on their own people first. And when I say our own people, I'm talking about across the globe. Whatever your percentage of African blood is, and whatever nation you're living in, I just want this message to get around. If you're in Suriname, if you're in Guyana, if you're in Barbados, if you're in Ghana, if you're in Lagos, specifically, even as much as I've had to talk trash about the scammers coming out of Nigeria, I want even them to benefit from this, the ones that have not done so already. I even want Muslims who have been Muslim their whole lives to understand that God did not reveal this and leave out what we need as a people. If you are in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Pretoria, Mpumalanga province, Equatini, Port Elizabeth, East London, anywhere in the Orange Free State for that matter, if you're in Namibia or Libya, I just want this to get out and benefit folks. And to a certain extent, I even want this to benefit people that have been oppressed in other places outside, like in West Papua. I want this to benefit the Rohingya who are already Muslim, but they haven't had time to study it. And they don't know that the revolution they need is already encoded in the revelation that they read. Even them, and they ain't black, I don't know how they feel about black folks, but I don't want them to continue suffering the oppression that they're suffering in Burma because they don't know that their liberation is encoded in this, because they've been given a wrong interpretation. Thanks all. I appreciate you all listening. You all have been very patient with me. And I'm telling Stuart, I got some insight from you today too. I'm glad this could benefit you, and I learned some things from you as well. I want y'all to, Abdullah bin Bobby probably had to leave to go to the Friday prayer, but when y'all catch him later on, let him know, pass my thanks on to him. I want y'all to read what I said earlier about, or what he said actually about Ahmed Yusuf Gabroon. Share that with the masses. Look up the Wolof Rebellion of Christmas of 1521 and share that with the masses too. If this video was not hard hitting enough, and it's okay if it's not, then at least take the information to which I've referred and share that. I'm going to allow the live stream to play back later. So, you don't have to listen to this again. You can pull it out of the live stream and copy and paste it, share that, and let folks know that there is no divorcing Islam from black liberation, and there's no divorcing Islam from the liberation that other people need when they're oppressed as well. Abdullah bin Bobby, good, you're still in, man. You've been a big help. And I thank you for sending that link about Ahmed Yusuf Gabroon. I just got through asking others to hit the share button on that too. And thank you while I'm listening. I really appreciate that. I hope so. May Allah make me of those who earn the compliment you just gave me. I was not aware of the IERA videos where they accepted Islam. I was unaware of that. But see, if they accept Islam and they're still being oppressed by the Indonesian government, they still have the right to fight back against the government, even though the government's, of course, going to say, oh, we're all Muslim. You can't fight us anymore. Let us stay here. They're going to say that. They have the right now to still fight back because you know what? The Indonesian population is against what the government's doing to them. That's the other thing, too. And yeah, it's the natural inclination. I mean, we don't naturally think that it's okay to worship more than one God. We just naturally understand that by the definition of the word God, it must be one, because if two of them are going to have a conflict, somebody's going to win. And the one that didn't is obviously not a deity, but something else. We'd have to come up with a new word for whichever one didn't win the conflict. So it is in our nature. We understand that there's got to be a superior power over everything else that's responsible for the creation. And that alone must be where we owe our worship. It must be that. It's just, people haven't really sat down and thought about it enough. And I understand to a certain extent, we're busy. We don't have time to think about everything the way we should. We got to work, we got to earn a living. But even in the times that we do have, we're trained not to reflect. We're brainwashed to not do it. See, the television can either make you think deeply or it can make you think shallowly, either one. It can cause either one. But a lot of us, we turn that boob tube on and we don't really think deeply. And that's part of why it is that there are some Muslim guys in this red pill space that just want to bash women. It's not necessary. You take certain options away from them and like what they've done, and you've done the best you can. No need to bash. You just tell the truth. You don't take any crap. You don't dish out any either. You just take away certain options. You're not going to reward bad behavior the same way Allah's not going to reward our sins. But, we don't think deeply enough a lot of times. But when we do sit down and think deeply, we realize that it is in our nature to worship one deity alone, without partners. The only question then becomes, what are the details? Like, how do you deal with specific situations in a way that's fair to everybody? And what are you not responsible for? And that's where the revelation comes in. That's where the Quran comes in. That's where the sound hadith come in. That's where the prophets come in. Peace on them all. And that's why these examples were recorded by the scholars. And of course, some people are going to come along and they're going to say to you, look, understand this, even if you do become Muslim, those of you that are not, yes, you're going to have some non-black Muslims that will approach you and they will say, why do you always talk this black stuff? You need to get over it. And then they're going to give you stories of the companions, and they're going to give you stories where Bilal was insulted by another companion and forgave him, and that sort of thing. What they're not going to tell you in these cases is that the bias was still never allowed. Just because they struggled against it didn't mean they ever had permission to do it. It was never okay. And even the hadith where they're going to tell you that Abu Dhar insulted Bilal, may Allah be pleased with both of them, and Bilal forgave him, that even that is not interpreted correctly, because in actuality, what the hadith says is that one person insulted another person's lineage, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to the one that said the insult, you have the traits of Jahiliyyah in you. That's really what happened. The people, the identities were not specified, but Abu Dhar said that it was him that did it to somebody. He didn't say it was Bilal, but he said he did it to somebody. And Abdullah bin Babi studied this, so if my memory's bad, take what he says over mine. But what I'm saying is that they're going to come to you and they're going to give you this Martin Luther King Jr. type image of any black Sahaba, specifically Bilal. They're going to do that. They're not going to tell you that Bilal took vengeance on his slave master at the battle of Uhud, the Battle of Badr, I believe it was, that he took vengeance on his former slave master that tortured him, killed him, and nobody said a mumbling word about it, which means that it was okay. They're not going to tell you that. You need to know that that's there, and you need to know that they're not going to tell you. But just because they're going to come along and tell you certain stories with a particular twist and bend, and they're going to try to tell you that Malcolm X died loving white people and loving Arabs and Indians and everybody else that was lighter skinned, don't fall for that. That's why I'm telling you to look at the sources that I just told you about. because even many of the youth of these non-black communities and ethnicities are sick and tired of their parents' racism and colorism. Whether it's subliminal or whether it's overt, even they're getting sick and tired of it. Yep, Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu was a dark-skinned Arab. He was described as being a black Arab himself. So the hadith about him saying son of a black woman, I think that one was not proven or solid as a hadith in which he simply said that he insulted somebody about their lineage and he was put in his place. And yeah, Abu Dhar did in fact repent of whatever he said to whoever he said it. He did repent of that. He was the one that told on himself in the hadith. The point I'm making is that they're not going to come to you with that. They're going to come to you with Abu Dhar said to Bilal, Ya Ibn Sauda, and Bilal forgave him. And Muhammad just said, you got the traits of Jahili. He didn't call him a kafir, disbeliever, or anything like that. Why are you going too far with the stuff? And that's when you say to them, look, if you can admit that the bias against black people is wrong and the bias against dark skin is wrong and you're struggling against it, then you're just a person struggling against an imperfection. But if you were going to try to justify people's biases against black people and dark skin, justifying it, you're trying to justify that which Allah specifically forbade through revelation, through his prophet, peace be to him. And that's what makes you a disbeliever. And I'm calling your faith into question if you do it. You cannot justify anti-blackness. You can justify a cultural bias to a certain extent based on culture, because cultures are good and bad. But when they come to you trying to tell you tone it down and they try to turn you into the Muslim MLK, shuck that fit. You turn to them and you state to them, we cannot make lawful what Allah forbade, and we cannot forbid what Allah made lawful. And he forbade, if he forbade nationalism, he certainly forbade racism. And I don't see the Muslims doing this now. And see, the elders that are doing this in their communities have already ticked off their own youth. So if you do become Muslim and you join the community, you're going to find that their youth are usually on your side against the elders, even if they can only say so much. Because their youth know this is wrong. Their youth understand ain't nothing wrong with your shade and your 4C hair and your wide nose and your big lips. Ain't nothing wrong with you having an afro. They know this. And they're sick and tired of their parents and the foolishness and their grandparents. They know that there's no reason to be using skin bleach. They get this. And you'll see this. That's one of the good things about it. The last sermon was against racism. It was against bias in general. But it's funny because he specified the two types of bias that you were most likely to see back then. In the order you were most likely to see it, Arab versus non-Arab, and then the skin color bias. That's the amazing thing about it. But then he also said that the only superiority or inferiority was in piety, which was necessary to say, because people, that's the wisdom against it. You aren't equal to everybody else, morally speaking. You're equal under the law, but you're not morally equal to everybody else. There are people that actually are morally inferior to you. And there are people that are morally superior to you because they make the right moral choices or they make the wrong ones. If you make the moral choice to oppress somebody and treat them in ways you would never accept for yourself, you obviously are a moral inferior by virtue of your oppression. And this is something that had to be said, because we have every right to say to them, if we don't oppress you and we don't even have a bias against you, and you got a bias against us to the point you will even oppress the people of your own who most closely resemble us, who is the moral inferior now? So in other words, their racism, colorism, anti-blackness, whatever you want to call it, makes them your moral inferior. You don't owe them the presumption of equality anymore because they did it openly and then try to come to you and tell you to tone down your reaction. Shuck that fit. Call their religion into question. That's the weapon that has not been wielded yet, and it needs to be. And we have the opportunity to be not only the first race on the planet, but the first race to wield that weapon and call into question the faith of those who won't unequivocally condemn racism and anti-blackness and white supremacy. Because there really is no other racism right now on the planet except anti-black white supremacy. Think about it. What other is institutionalized in culture and ever has been in law? Do you ever hear about black Arabs calling the bronze Arabs kidnappers, terrorists, and bomb belts? You don't hear about it because they don't do it. I had to tell the black Gulf Arabs here to start doing that. I had to say this to them. The idea never crossed their mind until my light skinned behind got up with the little white blood I got and told them, you need to learn the same type of animosity against them for their racism that they've got against you for your color and your hair. You need to fight back. Next time one of them comes, knocks on your door and says he wants to marry your daughter, you say to him, no. The only way that's going to happen is if one of our men can marry one of the women from your family, and the dowries must be equal. One for one and none for none, because your people have not confronted their own demons. And you being the exception is not enough anymore. We're the ones that never forced them to learn the true lesson of our equality with them. And we've been willing to accept them as equals even when they can't show the same piety, which is the only criteria by which Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in that last sermon that somebody could be better or worse. And if you presume you're better, you must be worse. But did we ever presume to be better than them, or did they presume to be better than us? Even when they don't hate us, there's still this assumption that they're normal and we're somehow abnormal, even when they are your friends, and they do make great friends. That's the thing about it. I mean, I don't know about I'm not sure about the Daisies, but I could tell you that the Arabs actually can make great friends to black people on a personal level. I don't mean collectively, but on a personal level, they actually can be. And you will even find Arabs that are pro-black and they don't look like they've got black blood in them. You'll find some that are like that. To be fair, but collectively speaking, when it comes to them or anybody else, the Daisies, the Afghans, the Persians, who has it been that has made themselves the moral inferior of others? They took the one criteria by which they could have made themselves inferior, and they used it to make themselves inferior. So wield that weapon, y'all. Share this. And if you ain't Muslim and you're considering being Muslim, it's good to get prepared. Because I'm going to tell you the religion's correct. I just want you to be prepared when you accept it. And I don't want them to be able to come to you and throw you off. Now, I know what they're going to come to you with, but I don't want them to be able to throw you off with it. You're not the one walking in saying, I'm better than you because I'm black. What I'm saying is you have the right to walk in and say, if you're a racist, I'm better than you. And if you're not, then I don't have any grounds to say that. And when they say, well, what if I am a racist? Why would you say that? That's when you say, well, because I'm not one. So if you are racist, you've made yourself inferior. I didn't walk in as a superior per se. It's more like you just made yourself inferior if you're a racist. And like I said, if you're not, then I don't have that assumption to make. That's real, folks. That's exactly what needs to be done, what needs to be said. Do we need this religion? Do we need the whole way of life that comes with this revelation? Absolutely. But do we also need to prepare for the effery that some paler people are going to try to come to us with to throw us off so that we'll accept actually a station at the back of the camel, so to speak? Yeah, we need that preparation. We need a preparation that others may not have to think about and worry about. You see, when the white person accepts Islam, their white privilege then only exists in the Muslim community because they're going to be prized by the non-black Muslims. And the funny thing is they don't look for that. They're not looking for this. Most of the white folks that accept Islam and join the ranks aren't trying to be treated. They want the equality the same way. They don't want any more unfair privilege. That's the irony of it. They walk in and in the masjid, they then have the privilege that they don't know is white privilege. They think it's convert privilege. This is the pattern that they usually go through. They've got convert privilege and they're thinking, okay, well, I'll take that because it's based on something I actually did. They appreciate me changing my faith. So thank you. And then they realize that after they've been pushed up to masjid spokesperson and they've been giving marriage proposals to marry other people's daughters. They realize that after they've gotten this, and then they see an African American or Latin American even come in and accept Islam, and they don't get that kind of treatment, and people ain't calling them, and after 2 weeks, they're not there in the masjid anymore, and you don't know if they're even Muslim anymore. They look and they say, wait a minute, I wasn't given this cold welcome. What gives? And then they get sick and tired. They say, oh, okay, done with this. And they go to the black masajid for equal treatment. Usually they wind up becoming Salafi after that point, because they're trying to not get white privilege. They don't want it. And they realize that they have a better chance of not getting white privilege in a black Salafi masjid in the hood than they do at a predominantly mixed or immigrant masjid in a nice neighborhood somewhere. That's usually what happens with them. But guess who gives them the rough time? It's their own people, like I said. That's the irony of it. You don't have to have this conversation with a Caucasian. Either he's Eastern European, been Muslim all his life, but he just doesn't have that mindset because they weren't raised that way, or he's a Western European descendant who became Muslim and he's done with that mindset, or he's a Western European whose parents became Muslim and he was born that way and he was not raised with that mindset. You don't have to worry about the Caucasians anymore at this point. You got to be leery of the sly stuff that, the half black folks are going to come tell you. Is the religion correct? Absolutely. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's just unfortunate that the others are forcing you to get a preparation you shouldn't have to get, but they don't give you a choice. So you walk in with that arm and that shield and you're ready, and you Tai Chi that stuff. Well, brother Malcolm X, I'm sure you've heard of him. He changed his mind. Yeah, brother, I know exactly what he changed his mind to. I read his autobiography. He was still against racial injustice. He just didn't call you out for it because he was not aware of how pervasive it was in your culture. So he didn't level any accusations without knowledge. That's all. I am aware of it. Did anybody in your household ever buy any skin bleach, brother? So who do you really worship? God made y'all dark and you want to get paler? Who do you really worship? Brother, are you giving me these expectations from the Quran or from Bollywood? That's just it, Gragan. It's their issue. It's not ours. And that's exactly what we have to tell them. We say, no, we're confronting the issue. The problem actually is yours. And let them know. You know what you say to them? Look, you know what? The Caucasian that converted was pushed out by his people. They gave him the trouble. But the white privilege they didn't want anymore, they found here. They just thought it was convert privilege because you extended to them the white privilege when the system wouldn't do so anymore because they had accepted Islam. Call them on it. Ask them why they hold fast to this shirk, because that's exactly what it is when they start. If they really analyze it, they'll realize it's shirk. If Allah said we start off as equals by default and only piety can separate us, and they still act like we can be unequal based on things outside of piety and based on things we can't control, they have gone against the revelation of Allah. When they're not aware of it, they just need to be made aware. But when they are made aware of it and they persist in it, call their religion into question, because why not? At this point, they're the ones with the problem, like you said. We're just showing them that, holding the mirror up. And then they got to decide, do I want to be a colorist bastard or do I want to be Muslim? Because I obviously can't be both while knowing what I'm doing. That's why they're going to come at you with stuff that sounds exactly like what white liberals might have tried to do outside of Muslim circles. And now we even got some that are in the Muslim circles trying this stuff. They're far right, Republican, but they're Muslim, or so they say. And there's no such thing as identity politics, or there shouldn't be. And why do you talk about that? And you know what? There really is no racial injustice in America anymore. It's class issues. And if you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and pulled your pants up, you would be in a higher class anyway. There are some Muslims now beginning to talk like this because we didn't confront the masses before enough. And they need to hear us say certain things. We need to hear us say certain things like, for instance, no skin bleach in my house. And nobody who uses it can come and talk to me about marrying my daughter or my son for that matter. No one who thinks it's okay to use that can come talk to me about that. Mufti Munir speaking about a story in a mosque where he walked in with brother and they thought it was New Reaver and tried to teach him who Jesus was when he got back from Medina University. You see, there is that assumption. And that's not a malicious assumption they make, but it is an assumption. Where we're thought of being always converts, even if we come from multiple generations of Muslims. Now, I actually am someone that accepted Islam as an adult. They happen to be right in my case, but yeah, this is an issue. And you know what else makes it even worse? At this point, I've been Muslim as long as my students have been alive. I've been Muslim 18 years, and most of my students are between 17 and 19 years old, 17, 18, and 19. And there are some of my students that think I don't know anything about this religion. I cracked a joke one time, and I said, I think I'm gonna play some Quran and watch some of you all catch on fire. I was teasing some of my students because of their behavior, right? I wasn't making fun of the Quran, obviously. I was making fun of the students. Somebody said to me, teacher, this is Muslim country. You must respect the Quran. I told them, I know that. I've been Muslim longer than you've been alive. I didn't make any disrespectful comments or jokes about the Quran. I'm not that stupid. I was talking about these students over here that misbehaved, and now you're up here defending them. You're not defending the Quran for me because I'm not attacking it. You're defending their bad behavior, and now I count you as one of them. Nigga, you knew I became Muslim in 2002. That's exactly what I told him. That's when he was born. So yeah, there is this thought, this assumption, and they'll make that assumption even about non-black people to a certain extent. To be honest, they'll make that assumption too. I remember once when I was new here, I'd been Muslim at that time 12 years. So most of my students had been, I think, 6 years old when I became Muslim, and something similar happened. I remember they asked me if I needed any copies, and I was like, well, I got my own copy of the Quran and a translation in English. Thanks a million. I got mine. But I tell you what, there's some Latin American Muslims that could use a Spanish translation if you could find it. They came back with a French translation. I was like, well, thank you. Okay, I'll see if somebody can use this, but you know, I did say Spanish. And they came back with English translations too. And they were like, yeah, but these are for you. Yeah, okay, you know what? I remember one point I had 7 copies of the Quran given to me as gifts as if I had never read one before. I finally called one guy out on this and I said, wait, hold up. Now, you heard me tell someone I got 6 copies and you brought me a 7th. Now, what gives? And this dude was like, well, I thought you didn't read it because of the way that you talk about race. Now, this was in a real Bedouin village, developed, but backwards mentally. Now, I didn't throw it at him, but I had to try to set him straight. He kept interrupting, and I finally just said, sorry, but you're too dumb to learn what you need to know. Let's just call it what it is. You just don't have the mental capacity to understand. Stop interrupting me. The fact is you're too stupid because you keep interrupting me, and that's why you never learn anything. You think I'm a racist because I don't tolerate racism. And if you can't tell the difference between an anti-racist and a racist, then that's why Allah revealed Surah 9, verse 97 and 98 about you all. Now I get it. See, back then I was even more militant. But at no point did any of them prove to me that my anti-racism or that any other black person's anti-racism was somehow wrong in Islam. It was their racism that was. They may come along sometimes and say, how dare you make everything about race? That's when you say to them, how dare you assume the normality of whiteness, and you're not even white. How dare you look at the actual white sisters and brothers we have that converted with no superiority complex and still assume their superiority over us when they themselves don't. There's no question of how dare me, nigga, how dare you? Oh, and by the way, does anybody in your family have any skin bleach? These are questions that need to be asked, because to them, what I'm trying to explain is that to many of them, it is true. Whiteness is like another God to them. They're just not aware that they're doing that. Just like football to a lot of Muslims is another religion. And that's why they'll know the names of 10 football players and not the names of 5 Sahaba. And even I need to learn more names of them. But just like that, skin bleach is okay to them, because whiteness is a false god and white supremacy is the false religion. So we're literally fighting idol worship in the ummah. So I'm talking to the Muslims now, and I'm telling you that when we're dealing with black folk that can't stand Islam, there are going to be 2 reasons. Like I said, there are the vices in which some of them just have to indulge and they're addicted to them. And that's true. That does exist. We got to deal with that. But we got to have the backbone to tell some of them, okay, see, now I don't remove the other excuses you got. At this point, it's about the liquor. It's about fornication. It's about some vice you got. But there are going to be those who actually have been misled because they saw Muslims that worshiped the false god of whiteness according to the religion of white supremacy, instead of worshiping Allah according to the revelation that he gave to his prophets with an S. And that's true, telling Stuart, all weren't created to get along. What we need to realize is that we ain't the problem. When we don't get along with them, we ain't got nothing to apologize for except not being militant enough. And one of the things is that one of the reasons that a lot of black folks who ain't Muslim really do think that this religion can't possibly be the true religion is because they've seen that we don't fight. They see some of the anti-black standards and the anti-black stories that actually do happen. Like how that Lebanese singer came out with that song and she said something about a Nubian monkey. No, I kid you not. Or when a light-skinned black woman in Sudan got married to a dark-skinned black man, and a bunch of Arabs even in Sudan, but mostly outside of Sudan, were saying, oh my God, look at this. These weren't Gulf Arabs, by the way, that were talking. They would just say, oh, wow, that's strange, but it's their business. That's how Gulf Arabs think. No, these were North African Arabs that were largely saying, oh my God, look at this. The day that the queens marry the slaves or the owners marry the slave. I kid you not. That's what they said. And what they don't see is us firing back and saying, you rat bastard, idol worshiping, kidnapper, bomb belt wearing terrorist. They don't see us fighting back and hurling insults back at them. A lot of us, especially the Salafis amongst us, are very patient, and we tolerate it, and we let it go, and we tell each other to calm down. When I first divorced my second ex from North Africa, at the time, I thought she asked me for a divorce because we'd only had one argument, and that was about racial attitudes towards black folks in North Africa. And she's a black woman that at one point justified and sympathized with their anti-tropical African attitudes. So I gave her the divorce when she asked. And I told her, look, I love you, but you requested a divorce, and I promised I'd only give it to you if you asked. And considering the reason that I think you're asking, you can have it. But when I told some of my colleagues, when they would ask me, how's your wife? And I would say, well, she ain't my wife much longer. We're getting a divorce. Oh, what's wrong? These were African-American and black British brothers. They were Muslim, Salafis. They would say, oh, what's going on? Now, they would try to reconciliation, and I don't blame them because that's the Islamic thing to do. You at least attempt a reconciliation. But when I said to them, she got problems with black people, and she's a black woman on African soil. Her dad's black, but she got issues with black people. Come on now, you think I'm gonna stand for that after she asked me for the divorce? I gave her the correction first. 10 days later, she asked for the divorce. What you expect me to do? And they would say to me, you need to work it out. That's what they would say to me. Now, Arabs would say the same thing to me. Oh, you can work that out. It's not that bad. And I would be like, hold up, Mr. Arab. If she had a problem with Arabs, would you stay with her? No. Well, then F you. You don't tell me to stay with a woman that's got problems with black people, but you won't stay with someone that's got problems with Arabs. And you all deserve people that have problems with you. Backwards ass Bedouin. We had these arguments, but I was shocked to hear black Muslims from the West that were Salafi sit up and tell me I needed to deal with this. It's okay. It's not that bad. This is why black folks that ain't Muslim are looking at us and saying, you Arab flunky. That's our fault. We do not fight back, and we do not tell them what kind of disbelievers they are for worshiping these false idols, these non-God gods. That's on us. We're going to have to take responsibility for that. We didn't fight back enough. We said, I'm going to suppress my nafs and get along for the greater good. The greater good was that you make them question their own faith and fit the guck out. So that somebody else who was oppressed and needed the medicine would say, oh, wow, this is a medicine. It actually is medicinal. That's on us. We were so busy trying to impress these lighter-skinned people with our character and patience that we missed the boat. Just like we got mad at some of them because they were so busy trying to impress white people with their Islam that they missed the boat with us, right? We turned around and missed the boat with us. Well, exactly. You talk about your own nation or your own people, they call you a nationalist just for that, but then they can talk about the Arabs all day, or they can talk about Pakistan all day, long as they bob their head when they do it. They can do that. Or they can say the Muslims in India all day, as long as they bob their head when they do it. And if they want to watch Bollywood films, that's okay. But you sit around and you decide you just want to have a good laugh and watch Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood, which is a comedy and not even something to take seriously. And they want to say, brother, you're so racist. But see, we don't fire back at them. And that's where we screwed up. Now, a lot of us, what's happening is that many of us now are beginning to fire back. But we're firing back the way the non-Muslims were firing back, non-Muslim black folks. That's what we're wrong for that, because we didn't fire back on our own terms as black Muslims. We're firing back. When we do fire back at them, we're doing it the way that non-Muslims do. And of course, they're not bound by what we're bound by. So they may, in fact, overreact according to our standards because they're going by their own standards. So many of us are turning around and then we go too far and we say, F you. And then some of us get so heated, we decide we're going to leave the religion instead of realizing that, no, we were always Muslim. They're not. Unless, of course, they weren't aware of what they were doing. But when you made them aware and they persisted and tried to justify it, now they're not Muslim because they tried to halalicize what Allah made haram and forbade. And see, Allah did not make self-love forbidden. He did not make different ethnicities forbidden. He did not forbid this. He forbade supporting anybody when they're wrong against those who were right. That's what he forbade. When we are separatists and want to do our own thing, that is not our fault. That is theirs. They didn't give us an option. They didn't give us a choice. It's just like when Palestinians do something and they don't want to include the Israelis. They're not wrong for that. The Israelis ain't going to get in that with them. They're just going to mess it up. Well, that's what happens with us. Within the ummah, we have to admit, we do have to be more separatist, not because we're superior, but because they're not ready to realize our equality. They didn't give us a choice. That's their fault, not ours. That's the necessity of black nationalism. Black nationalism is not a sin, it's a necessity. Arab nationalism is a sin. They don't deserve to have their own nations. They don't deserve to be in charge over anybody else. They need to be ruled by somebody else. My only problem with the Turks ruling them is that the Turks are even paler than they are. They need to be ruled by someone darker than they are and poorer than they are. Now, I don't care if that's the Bangladeshi or the African. That's what they need. It's like you said. They'll say pray for Palestine, fine. But they don't want you to talk about Somalia. All right, peace out, Brother Taylor. I understand, man. We all got to work. And that's when we got to start firing back at them with the right ammo. And we know as Muslims how to do that with the right ammo when we do it. When we think about it with a cool head, we know how to do it. And if we plan that with a cool head and thought ahead, the time's going to come. You just need to rehearse it in your head about 3 times, and then you're ready when it happens, and you just start firing into them. And just like they always love to interrupt you, brother, you say, no, you shut up because I heard you out. Now you hear me out. Stop interrupting me because I didn't interrupt you. And you just start ripping into them. And then you say, now, what's your side? What's your answer? I'm listening to you. Now it's your turn. And if they can't let you finish, then you say, that's because you're a backwards Bedouin. That's why you can't listen to anybody else. And that's why Allah revealed Surah 9, verse 97 and 98 about you. That's why you got to do that. You rehearse it in your head, and you got to do this because you got to understand that some black folk that are on the verge are going to be hearing this at some point. And that's why also when someone says these things about us, like they call us slaves, and you correct them on it, and they don't want to admit that they're just goddamn wrong for it until you call them a terrorist, usually I'll give them credit. They will admit that they're wrong. But when they say, I'm sorry, brother, we need to say to them, look, I personally will accept your apology, but see, now you want an apology to a race of people that have already been oppressed. It's not me to whom you owe the apology by myself. It's an entire race. Unless, of course, you can accept them calling you a terrorist and a bomb belt. Now, if you can accept that, then at least you've been fair. We have to do this because, see, we oftentimes tend to forgive somebody on behalf of the entire race, and that's not our right. We have been insulted unduly by people, even when they don't hate us. Even at times when they don't mean to insult us, they've still done it, and they've done it in ways they would not tolerate from us. We teach them a lesson, not because they're probably going to learn it, but we at least do this to set the tone and set the precedent that when they do this, we have every right to defend ourselves just like they would. Bedouins don't let you say true things about Bedouins that they need to hear. So how dare they tell you that you're nationalist because you defend black people? How dare they even assert that? You won't tolerate racism and anti-blackness, so you're a black nationalist. And you need to be more like Malcolm was the day that you need to be more the way that they think Malcolm was, or try to convince you he was the day that they shot him. When in fact, Malcolm still was against racists. He just stopped saying that white people were born devils because they're white. And I'll be honest. Okay, Google me. You said you got into it as a practical and disciplined way of living to amplify my own black nationalist beliefs. And that would depend on what you mean. I mean, if you mean as a way that black people could go free from oppression, that's exactly a good reason to do it. In this world, there is still also the other reason, which is the life to come. And that's just as necessary. We got to go through this world and live in it, and we got to go and live in the next life in one of two places. We won't have a choice we won't have a choice to not do that. We only have a choice now as to where that's going to be. But the fact is that, yeah, I mean, if you were doing it as a way to go free of oppression and to rescue yourself in both lives on both sides of the grave and even in the grave, then that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Because it is the truth. It is the right way to live. Now, if it was just about only being pro-black and being against everybody else, even if we're wrong about something, then absolutely that would be the wrong reason, of course. Because it's not about us getting away with being wrong. It's just about us not suffering greater consequences when we're wrong than anybody else has to. Or getting less for being right than anybody else would get when they're right. It's just about the equality of it. Yep, HTS, we don't owe anyone anything. Actually, we do owe some people some butt whoopings. Some of them Muslim, most of them not. But we do owe some of that. And I love it. That's exactly the attitude we need to have. Not only when we're Muslim and we're dealing with some other Muslims that want to tell us to tone it down, but even when we're dealing with these respectability politics preaching people, pull your pants up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We need to say to them, F you, we don't owe you anything but a butt whooping, to be honest with you. We don't owe white America anything except to become their Al-Qaeda. We should have been the first ones to be their Al-Qaeda. That's what we owe. We owe y'all terrorism and conquest, pillage and plunder. But we're not doing that. And I don't have any plans to do that. I don't know how to. But we do need to say to them, we don't owe you anything. This is what we owe ourselves, to pull our pants up and do whatever we can to better our situation. Yeah, we owe that to ourselves, not you. In front of you, y'all shouldn't say anything. We pull our pants down and start talking the way you can't understand, and it irritates you. Good. Is there anything we can do to irritate you more? Because you deserve it. We got to have this militant attitude with a lot of people. Because even when we're dealing with somebody, like even when somebody black that ain't Muslim is looking and watching us, we're not here to say, okay, brother, you're automatically right just because you're black. It's more like you're not wrong because you didn't do anything wrong to anybody else. But even if we don't agree on religion, I'm not going to let them trample your rights. Not even just because you're black, but because they're wrong. And that's why I'm not going to let them do it. That's enough. A level-headed person can understand the justice in that. You see, the misleading of our people about what Islam really is not only something that has been done to us by the white power structure through some Negro proxies, it is also something that we, the Muslims who mean well, have participated in without meaning to do it. It was a mistake. It was accidental. We weren't trying to do it. I get it. Now we know better. Now we know we got to start firing back at people. Now we got to start doing that. Yes, for 135. Be constantly upright with equity. Always telling the truth, even if it's against ourselves. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do now. We screwed up, and I'm trying to tell us how to get it right and admit that we screwed up. We don't have to lie on other people to do that. We just need to tell them, if you're doing this without thinking about it, then you need to start thinking about it and stop doing it. If you're doing this knowing what you were doing, you put your own religion into question. And and understand when they do this, we need to make them understand when they do this, they have taken people who are oppressed and pushed them out of it, pushed them away. Because they demonstrated that Islam is not true for them. They sat up and said, well, yeah, I mean, Islam is the truth, but it wasn't revealed for you because you're oppressed. Because you're darker, your hair is nappy, nobody likes you. So Allah wasn't thinking about you when he revealed. That's what they're demonstrating to them. In HTSM, the truth be told, there are going to be some black people that are going to deserve it. There are going to be some black folks. If they know this about you, they're going to be the ones that wind up walking up to you and deserve to get hit. But I know why it is that you're saying you don't mess with them, because black folks already been through enough. So if you're saying this because of what black folk already been through, then I can't argue against it. There's nothing I can say against it. You don't want to further oppress someone that's been oppressed, even if they're starting to fight. If it is only because they're black and you're black, and that's the only reason, then I could say, okay, see, that's just plain old bias. And that means that what I'm saying is we Muslims got to do the right thing, even for the right reasons. So even if we do the right thing, we can't do the right thing for the wrong reason. And if something is because someone has been oppressed enough and you're not going to contribute to that, okay, I can't knock that reason. Nobody I know of can. And may Allah bless you for that. If that's the reason. And see, I'm going to tell you all this last thing, and then I'm going to go, because I've been at this 3 hours. I was about to sign off before. We're coming up on 4 hours now. And y'all have been great. Y'all have been patient. I appreciate that. So I'm going to say this right quick. When we start firing back at these, and usually they're not going to be white Muslims, ironically, but at these semi-black Muslims that talk this crap, keep two things in mind. Number one, that their youth are going to also be on your side against the elders. They may not be vocal about it, but usually they're going to be on your side. They're not usually a part of the problem. So you're not really going to have a lot of issues with them. So give them a little bit more of a chance to show who they are, because they got a very high chance of seeing it the way you do. You're not better because you're black. It's just that, you know what, you're not worse either because you're black, and there's absolutely no way that they're going to side with even their parents in that regard. All right, wa alaikum salam, Stuart. Yeah, you're in the Southeast, so make dua for the guidance of my parents and brother and son, please. You're welcome, Guragan. I hope it helps. So that's the first thing to understand. The youth are not necessarily the same enemy that the elders are. And when I say the elders, I'm right at the cusp of that. I'm right at the edge of that. So the ones that are my age could go either way. A lot of the ones that are older than me, or they came into whatever country you were in as adults, they're more likely to have the anti-black narrative. Ironically, the Turks don't have that either. The ones that are younger, or they grew up in the States and they're my age, or in the West and they're my age, they may have other issues, but usually the racism is one they don't have. They're not going to believe in stomping on you because you've already been oppressed and blamed enough. And they know that the parents are biased, and they're not going to support that, even if they don't speak out against them in front of you. But the next thing to understand is that when you fire back at these folks, they're going to come at you and they're going to say certain things that are technically correct, but they're telling you these things for the wrong reason. And these are the things they're going to tell you. They're going to say to you, we're all slaves of Allah. When you call them out for calling us slaves, they're going to say, but we're all slaves of Allah. That's technically a correct statement. They're also going to say, but Bilal was black and he was the most cherished of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, that is correct. Bilal was black and he had a high status. They're also going to tell you that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave his last sermon and he was against racism. So we're not racist. And there's no racism in Islam. These are three technically correct statements they're going to tell you. You let them finish when they say it. Then you say to them, nigga, I know that, but that's not enough. You're saying things that are correct, but you're saying them for the wrong reason. You're not saying them to confront the racism. You're saying them to shut me up from reacting against it. That's what it is. Call them out on it. You say to them, I'm not the one you have to tell this to. You need to go and tell this to the aunties that are over there buying skin bleach. You need to go and tell this to the grandmothers that are telling your kids, don't stay out in the sun or you'll get too dark. Because we know some of us used to say that too. And we need to start calling that mess out. And we need to tell them, you're saying this to me when you need to be saying this to them, to some of your own people. You need to be saying this to the Egyptians that used to make monkey noises when Zimbabwe's national football team played against the Egyptian one in Cairo. You need to be saying this to that Lebanese singer that made a song and had the lyrics Nubian monkey. And whoever the hell told her that that was okay. You need to be saying this to the Tunisians that have practiced discrimination against the black Tunisians and getting away with it. You need to be saying this to the king of Morocco who still owns people to this day and they're all black. He doesn't own one white slave that anybody's ever seen. If he does, he keeps it a secret. You tell them, you need to be saying this to the ones that sit up and call us slaves. And you don't say a damn thing about it, but they never think to call somebody that's not black a slave. You need to be saying this to, you need to be saying this to anybody that thinks that they're even so much as normal because of how dark they're not. Let them know this. Let them finish, and then you get on them and grill them about that. Keep that in mind. They're going to say things that are technically right. Don't let them trip you up because they're saying it for the wrong reason. They just don't want you to react the way they deserve. Get them on it. Because remember, a lot of black folks that ain't Muslim and never had a chance to learn about it are listening. And if they do shut you up, they're going to go and brag to others about how they handled the situation with wisdom and hikmah. When in reality, they just said something we weren't ready for. We got to keep this in mind and be ready for it. Because in order to help black folks who really do mean well and who are not just addicted to vices and want to live undisciplined, in order to help them to see the truth, we got to be ready to demonstrate and stand for our equality in front of them. To hell with what they're trying to do. They're trying to show how meek and mild they are to impress whites into accepting Islam, thinking that that's going to bring them privilege because they don't understand how white supremacy works. You're white, you accept Islam, the white society sees you as a traitor. You don't get white privilege anymore. Not from them. They get it when they come into the Muslim community because the Muslims will give it to them. They don't understand it. See, they're trying to impress them, and while they're trying to impress them, they want to overlook your spiritual needs and even your black cousin who's non-Muslim spiritual needs for equality and fair treatment. They want to overlook that because they're so busy trying to impress the white people with how violent they're not. And you get on them and you tell them about this. Call them out. Because just in case someone that's black and ain't Muslim is listening, they'll get it, inshallah. So while they're trying to impress white people into accepting it, but overlooking you, you go ahead and if you can, rightfully so, try to impress some black folks into accepting it for the right reasons, because God is God, Allah is God, and he's always right, and the oppressors are always wrong. And those who side with the oppressors, knowing their oppressors, are always wrong. That's the reason to be doing it. Make them know and understand. Start acting like Islam can't be divorced from black liberation or the liberation of anybody that's oppressed from their oppression. It can't be divorce. We just need to make that plain in the way we act. We need to stop sympathizing with people that as if they can't help themselves with their racism and their pro-whiteness and anti-blackness. We tend to act like it's something they can't really help. They don't know any better. We need to be patient. No, no, no. We need to stop that. We need to start acting like exactly what the hell it is. They are wrong. And they can help it. This is not some natural human weakness. They have to learn this, even if they only learned it at 6 months of age before they could talk and they don't remember where they got it from and they think it's a human instinct. That doesn't mean it is. We need to start treating them like, okay, you know what? You're ignorant. And then after that, see, now you're not ignorant, because they'll do that on you. They'll come and they'll try to show you a hadith or something. If there's something you don't want to do, they'll come and show you a hadith and say, no, you have to do it, brother. And if you don't accept it, then you're a disbeliever. Then they call you a kafir because either you don't practice it or you just don't believe, whatever the case is. They'll do that to you if they can. Think about it. They're not as relaxed with black Muslims as they are with white folks. You drink something that looks like it's a beer can, even though it's not. They want to tell you can't drink that around the masjid. It's not beer, man. It's something else. Yeah, but it looks like beer. You can't do that. White guy's interested in Islam. Comes to the masjid. He's just interested. Has an actual beer can in there. Come on in, brother. Let's sit down. Let's talk. You see the difference? Grill them. I don't let that slide. And when you call them out and explain to them what it is, and then they don't want to change, that's when you call their faith into question. Okay, so what makes you no longer it? What makes you still Muslim when you've ignored the proofs that I just brought you? That what you're doing is shirk. Call them on it. Make them understand that black nationalism is not anathematic to Islam. They made it a necessity for us when we didn't do that to them. That in actuality, it is their acceptance of white normality as an extension of white supremacy that is anathematic to Islam. And when they're aware of it and they still hold on to it, they've given up their Islam by choice. Make them aware of this. Thank you all for listening. I've gone on long enough. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum asumi, and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black out. Keep it militant.